I am having the hardest time trying to write this intro. Developed by Team Silent and published by Konami, Silent Hill 2 is the 2001 sequel to the 1999 PlayStation survival horror classic, Silent Hill. The first game is one of my all-time favorites, and I still have my original disc from 25 years ago. Yes, really. So why review Silent Hill 2 first? That's a valid question. The thing is, Silent Hill 2 is very important to me. The epilogue in this video will tell you why if you're curious. If not, no hard feelings. This review will play out as normal. That said, I've had to alter my usual format a bit for this retrospective. In most of my reviews, I like to talk about categories that comprise a game one by one. Something special about Silent Hill 2, however, is how the story, gameplay, graphics, and audio are all tightly braided together, and an attempt to untangle these threads individually would cause this review to be disjointed. So, I'll talk about the game as a whole, discussing the important elements along the way. I'm going deep on this one, but I'm sure that I'll miss certain references or quotes that you remember fondly, and if I did, I apologize. And unless it's been directly confirmed by a member of Team Silent, every theory I postulate on is just that, theory. I just think it's wonderful that we can all speculate on what we think something in this game means, and I love just letting my mind wander with possibilities. Just a quick FYI, for this review I made an ISO of my PS2 disc and emulated it. I do own an old AO1 PS3, but I'd like to preserve the old fat boy, and as of yet, don't have enough cash for a retro tink and a new PS2. I specifically wanted to play the PS2 version for the bulk of the review. I also own the PC version and use the Enhanced Edition, an incredible fan-created overhaul mod to the notoriously awful original PC port, and it's amazing. It supports high-definition resolutions, has widescreen support, upscales all the cutscenes and static background images, cleans up audio, and takes full advantage of incredible deep shadows. Seriously, it's wonderful, and I would argue it's objectively the best way to play the game, but I kept my PS2 disc for all these years, and it's the version I've played the most. It's Team Silent's original vision, and thus, I just wanted to keep it as close to my memory as I could. That said, this review contains Born from a Wish, the sub-scenario, and I recorded this footage entirely from the Enhanced Edition. Alright, that's the preamble done. Now, I just have a single warning. I'm going to talk about the major plot points of Silent Hill 2 in the next section to give context for the rest of the video. So if you've never played it, now's the time to stop and get on that. Trust me, if it's your first time, you'll want every bit of the game to be unspoiled. That's your warning.
I got it.
Now, let's discuss the saddest game ever made. As I say, it's important to discuss story beats to give context to the rest of the game as we discuss it. The game begins with James Sunderland, our protagonist, in a run-down, nasty bathroom atop an observation deck overlooking Toluca Lake. James recently received a letter from his late wife, Mary, who is said to have perished 3 years prior from a terminal illness. Naturally, James is uncertain, but the slim possibility leaves him no choice but to travel to Silent Hill to search for Mary on the off chance that she could be here. Alright, I lied. You get one more warning. And that was it. As it turns out, James euthanized his wife just before coming to Silent Hill. Mary had been ill for approximately 3 years, and in that time, James watched Mary slowly wilt and suffer through her illness. As her health declined, she became more venomous with James, who in turn began to drink more and visit her less as she drifted towards the end. Unable to bear this crushing weight any longer, James gave Mary one final kiss and suffocated her with a pillow. Following the murder, James suffered a complete psychotic break and dissociated from reality. James put Mary's body in the backseat of his 1978 Chevy Nova and drove to Silent Hill. By the time the game starts, James is already in the fog world. Sorry, I should explain. If you're new to the series or if it's been a while and you're rusty, let's establish the 3 major dimensions of Silent Hill. The 3 different planes of existence in this series are the real world, the fog world, and the Otherworld. Though it's implied to be a beautiful, quaint, idyllic little tourist town in Maine that James and Mary had vacationed in 3 years prior, you never actually spend any time in the real Silent Hill. There are many clues about what Silent Hill was long ago, all of it very fascinating, and the religious/cult aspects are more prominent in the first game. But in part 2, after James ended his wife, Silent Hill called to him and, upon arrival, was in the fog world. In the first game, fog was used to obscure the limited draw distance that the PlayStation 1 was capable of. In a smart move, this technical limitation was weaved into the story and was quite brilliantly used in the sequel to not only enhance the spooky atmosphere, but to denote that James Sunderland was, thematically, past the point of no return. The fog world is, in simple terms, an altered reality where a person has begun to atone for their sins. The fog indicates that the line is blurred, the first phase of the nightmare, so to speak. You see, Silent Hill and the power that the town possesses isn't inherently evil. The town itself isn't causing what you hallucinate. It's just the purveyor of your own worst emotions, and is helping to supply the physical manifestation of your guilt, pain, sadness, grief, etc. It doesn't make the town an innocent bystander, but it's really just a town. The major characters of the game carry the tremendous weight of their mental illness with them to Silent Hill, and the town simply reflects that back at them. And every major character has their own version of the fog world. They also have their own Otherworld. If the fog world is akin to swimming in the deep end, the Otherworld is like drowning. This hellish dimension is where a character goes when truly descending into the depths of their madness, or perhaps it's the town cranking up the test of that person's will. We're not really sure. There's never been a full black and white explanation of what the Otherworld truly is, but I've always seen it as I described above. In a doctor's journal found in Brookhaven Hospital, the Otherworld is referenced as an illness that exists in all people, and under the right conditions, anyone could be driven to this dimension. Although the Otherworld is shown as a dingy, rotting place filled with bottomless Stygian chasms, rusting metal, taut flesh, and monsters, the Otherworld is a phenomenon created by the mind of the person experiencing it. Think of the fog world but cranked up. This is why the child character, Laura, can run and play in Silent Hill like nothing is wrong, because technically for her, nothing is wrong. She's just a kid that came back to Silent Hill of her own volition, searching for someone, not an adult facing punishment for a past crime. Meanwhile, James Sunderland is trapped in this purgatory of his own doing, manifested as real and nurtured along by the power of the town. It's also implied that the Otherworld is not always bad, as everyone experiences it differently. In the doctor's journal mentioned earlier, a patient is referenced that seemed to be much happier there, and how cruel it would be to drag him back into what we understand as, quote, normal reality. Alright, so to sum up that section, there's the real Silent Hill, which James and Mary had toured 3 years prior. There's the Fog World, a border dimension where reality is distorted to reflect the inner demons of the one called to it, and there's the Otherworld, an even more intense border world where this reflection of the person's deepest traits, usually not good, is amplified tenfold. Both places are nurtured and made real by the power that the town of Silent Hill possesses. Cool?
I got it.
Now we begin Silent Hill 2 proper. Right from the very start, Team Silent frames our protagonist, James Sunderland, in such a way that he appears to be questioning his sanity. He's gazing into his own reflection, dragging his fingers awkwardly across his own face, almost checking one last time to make sure that he's not dreaming, considering that he's pursuing someone that he's almost certain is deceased. Almost. Thereafter, a lovely Dutch angle is set behind a urinal and spirals upright, meant to disorient the viewer, helping to put you in James's frame of mind. Straight away, Silent Hill is curating a version of reality for James to suffer in. If you look at the far wall near the exit, you'll see 2 posters for Heaven's Night, an adult club in town with Maria's face and torso prominent. We'll talk more about Maria soon, but suffice it to say, this is a big clue that James is already in the Fog World and being subjected to his punishment. It may not look like it now, but back in 2001, especially only a few short years after Silent Hill 1, the in-game visuals in Part 2 were mind-blowing. Stopping to look around, it's incredible how much detail was crammed into this small area. Filth all over the ground, grime covering porcelain and drywall, metal stall doors rusting, graffiti, faded posters, scattered aluminum cans. Everything feels organic and carefully placed. Nothing rushed. Team Silent were masters of their craft. You also get acquainted with the controls. Silent Hill 2 lets you choose between 3D and 2D controls. So, I personally love the tank controls as I grew up playing Resident Evil on the PS1, and it just feels right to me, but it's definitely anachronistic, especially if you're a younger gamer and not used to this. But it works well if you give it a few minutes. James can strafe with L1 and R1, walk backward at a normal and a quicker pace, and walk/run while holding square. Upon exiting the restroom, you hear Mary Sunderland, voiced by Monica Taylor Horgan, giving a few lines from the letter that was sent to James.
In my restless dreams, I see that town, Silent Hill. You promised you'd take me there again someday, but you never did. Well, I'm alone there now, in our special place, waiting for you.
You can also get a good listen at Guy Seehey portraying James Sunderland.
I got a letter. The name on the envelope said, Mary. My wife's name. It's ridiculous. Couldn't possibly be true.
This cutscene, though simple on the surface, is iconic and very important to the story overall. This is why I wanted to talk about spoilers off the rip, so that we could discuss important details as they come up. So, you'll notice first off, the fog. Again, it helps to set the tone of the game perfectly. However, it also typifies that, yes indeed, James is trapped here. You can also see that James parks like a complete asshole And really, it should be a Dodge Ram instead. His door is open as well, which can cause one to speculate that the guy really just has lost his care and control of normal human grace. Also, looking at that car, knowing that the wife that he smothered recently is wrapped up in a sheet in that back seat, just behind the opaque back window while he's discussing the letter that was sent from her, is chilling. James says that Mary died of that damn disease 3 years ago. Knowing that she is recently deceased, I always interpreted this as James considering her terminal diagnosis 3 years ago as when she died to him. Oof. Looking out over Toluca Lake, it seems quite peaceful, with a small sailboat out on a voyage off in the distance. Apparently the picture used for the lake is that of Derwentwater in the UK, which is supposed to be a beautiful place in real life, picturesque and serene. Well, remember it as it is here because later in the game it's not quite as scenic. The soundtrack here, composed by Akira Yamaoka, is perfect. The droning hum of this song tips the player off that, yeah, James's noble quest to find his betrothed is well and good, but you're about to suffer to learn the truth. If you try to leave, James will note that there's no point in going back. Not only is he caught and doesn't know it, but he's also committed. Remember, psychotic break. This next section is crucial. I can't believe that some have complained about this long intro portion. The point to this, as described by Team Silent themselves, is to give the player the sensation that they are truly past the point of no return. James is in deep now, totally enveloped by the fog. And I mean fog. The effect here is brilliant. Team Silent took full advantage of the PS2's fill rate, which, according to an article posted on Den of Geek, linked below, is anywhere from 1.2 to 2.4 gigapixels. Each gigapixel there is composed of 1 billion pixels. So, although on pure raw horsepower, the PS2 was considered inferior to the Xbox, in the hands of talented artists and programmers, this console could produce special effects that the other two systems couldn't match. Hence the Xbox version of this game generally being considered a somewhat lesser port, but we'll get to that later. You also get a listen at the sounds of the forest. This audio design highlights the eldritch horror that makes Silent Hill 2 scary. You never actually see any monster in the woods. This isn't foreshadowing a boss fight or anything like that, and that's what's so scary, the unknown. My mind races with possibilities of what's lurking just beyond this path. And nothing that I could see could be worse than what my mind is conjuring, and that's the goddamn fog world. As James's mind is generating the monsters he battles, the player's mind is teeming with potential. Entering the graveyard, we meet a very important character, and in fact, the face of the game on the cover, Angela Orozco, voiced by Donna Burke. As sad as the tale of James and Mary is, and it is, Angela's story is plain brutal. She was a victim of intimate assault in her childhood at the hands of her father and brother. It's implied that her mother was willfully ignorant of and making her complicit to this horrific behavior. Understanding this is important when analyzing her design. Firstly, she's in her late teens, but she looks and sounds like a lady in her late 30s. Donna Burke was hired because she was a little older than the character and her voice a few octaves lower than a typical teenager. She also appears older, and all of this was done deliberately, as the relentless abuse that she suffered has aged her ahead of her years. She's also wearing a turtleneck and long pants, covering up as much of her body as she can, and her speech is stilted, nervous, and oddly timed.
Kind of hard to explain, but
Is it dangerous?
maybe. And it's not just the fog either.
Okay,
It's...
I got it. I'll be careful.
I'm not lying.
No, I believe you. It's just... I guess I really don't care if it's dangerous or not. I'm going to town either way.
Also, there are clues to her prior assault within her speech, like when she adamantly insists that she's not lying about Silent Hill, implying that her history of abuse has been ignored. You can also hear James dismiss her pleas for him to be cautious as he ventures forth, as, again, he's fully committed, his own well-being be damned. Anyhow, I'm dumping quite a bit of exposition here, but I assure you that this stuff matters in the greater context of the overall story. Further along the trail we travel, getting little glimpses of farm equipment past barbed wire fences. At last we arrive in the town itself. This is a big deal to me, and it's something I really cherish in Silent Hill as a series in general. Walking through the town, you can see all kinds of businesses, tourist spots, parks, and residential areas. Aside from the fog and, cults and monsters with fleshy lips, I would love to live in a place like Silent Hill. A quaint waterside town with real mom and pop shops, a sense of community. You could see why James and Mary came here to relax. I'd love to play a Silent Hill game without the horror. Just running around buying trinkets on the cheap, getting a hot dog on the boardwalk, taking a row across Toluca Lake, and getting a handy in room 312 at Lakeview Hotel. Woo! I love just running around town, seeing the flower shop celebrating 70 years in business, the Happy Burger, the hardware stores, warehouses, and so forth. And again, the fog. No other people, the rust and grime on every surface. The atmosphere in Silent Hill is unmatched. Absolutely unmatched. Here we can see the animation where James turns his head towards items of interest in the environment. I really like that items aren't floating and shining like in most video games. They just appear as normal objects in everyday life, and this head-turning animation really helps offset the loss of those shiny effects that normally helps players to not miss important items. Calling back to James being unconcerned with his own safety in his psychotic pursuit, he has no qualms about following a giant bloodstain through town to pursue a gruesome, shadowy figure. Most of us would probably not do that, but hey, you gotta kill those long hours in purgatory. At the end of the trail, the player finds the iconic radio that crackles to life when near an enemy, just as it had in the first game. The sound was more of a ringing bell with Harry Mason, but it's still a clever gameplay feature and adds a great deal of tension in the various environments that you roam. James also encounters the first monster, known as a lying figure. The design is creepy by itself, but what it might represent is the true horror. The creatures were inspired by BDSM fashion and the contorted, evocative figures seen in the art of Francis Bacon, a very large inspiration for the style of this game overall. The upper half of the creature is what looks like a person wrapped in a body bag or a sheet. The lower portion resembles what could be a pair of female legs and a rather round behind. As the monsters in town are a manifestation of James's subconscious, this could be thought of as Mary being suffocated, and the writhing, thrashing movement puts some credence to that. It could also be that James's final image of Mary, wrapped up in a sheet in the back of his car, is being projected onto this monster. Their main mode of attack is spitting an acidic substance at the player. Some have speculated that this represents Mary's illness, or her hateful speech towards James near the end of her life, but it's not been confirmed. I do really love those theories though. You also get your first weapon, a 2x4 with nails. In another creepy detail, though you can't make it out all the way and the subtitles are deliberately incoherent, the voice in the radio is Mary, asking James why he killed her. Whew.
What the? I'd better take it anyway. I might need it.
In addition to fog, Team Silent incorporated another clever graphical effect throughout the game. James tracks blood on his shoes for a short while after a battle. Again, the word craftsmanship comes to mind. After the observation deck, trail, and graveyard, the trek through Silent Hill is kind of a free-form tutorial, so to speak. I thought it was really great to get into the town early and be given a bit of freedom, as most levels in the game take place in contained environments, and it's not a hand-holding experience with arrows and flashing symbols. Just like in the first Silent Hill, the town has a great sense of freedom and exploration, with the developers putting in clever barricades where they're needed to funnel the player in the general direction that you're supposed to go. If it's your first time playing or if it's been a while, don't worry about speed running this section. Take your time and soak in every bit of this game's atmosphere, which, as I stated earlier, is truly second to none, and you never know what you'll stumble across. But eventually, the wandering progresses the gameplay. You'll find clues in the world that will help point you in the right direction, like a memo in a camper. Here you get a look at another excellent gameplay feature, the map. Like in the first game, James can pull up his map with the triangle button, and at any time you find an interesting notation, a puzzle, a locked door, or a blocked path, James will scribble this on his map for future reference, like Harry Mason before him. It can become slightly tedious to pull up the map if you get turned around or forgot which room contained what, as there is a slight delay between loading the map and putting it away, but it's never really an issue, and really, I've always just been so grateful to the map for saving a ton of aimless wandering. In the Enhanced Edition, the transitions are much quicker, which is fantastic. James can also find maps for the various areas you travel to, and he'll update his current map with clues in the world therein. As you run about, you'll take note of James's running animation. It's not a whole lot different than that of Harry Mason's running cycle in Silent Hill 1, but I've always loved the sense of weight that James carries. There are a few startup frames of animation in his cycle that add heft to his movement, and a real sense of inertia when changing direction. And while we're on the subject of running around, I should mention the footstep audio. As trite as it may seem, there were over 100 different footsteps recorded for Silent Hill 2, to include trampling over asphalt, gravel, dirt, bits of glass, metal grating, cement, and so forth. This harkens back to my point about craftsmanship and how Team Silent didn't want to simply access the big library of sound effects to speed this part of production up. Quality Foley work is something that's truly underappreciated in gaming and in films, and especially in a horror game, can really make or break the immersion. And speaking on horror, the greatest fear of Silent Hill 2, as discussed earlier, is the unknown, but there is the occasional jump scare here and there. Unlike some obnoxious, trashy media, this game does jump scares right. They happen every so often and when you least expect them, which is how it should be. The game also has a ton of environmental storytelling, which makes exploring feel highly rewarding, even if the messages are somewhat cryptic. In Neely's bar, there's an iconic bit of text about a hole having been there. In general, the Silent Hill series has this weird fixation on holes. It's a quirky staple, but it also has quite a bit of symbolism here. During Mary's illness, James turned to booze to escape. The drink was his hole to crawl into, to hide away, so to speak. Well, now he's being held accountable by the town, and the hole is no longer there. Time to face reality. And when you come back later, another message has been added, something much more sinister. Talk more later. Searching the town also foreshadows events later in the game. On this giant tarp wall in South Vale, there's a cryptic message that this door wakes in darkness. This is a portend for when the Otherworld takes over late in the game. I really enjoy this cryptic, spooky stuff, but then things become more enclosed. Holy plum nuts, I love Woodside Apartments for so many reasons. It's where we get to more traditional survival horror gameplay, that is to say, close quarters, collecting items, solving riddles, and dodging monsters. Alright, so it should be said that Silent Hill 2 is pretty easy. There's no real inventory management like Resident Evil. You can just kind of pick up everything you want and hoard health and ammo, and the game gives you plenty of both. Most enemies are easy to dodge, and the few that you do fight are pretty painless. In a really cool feature, the player can select their action difficulty and riddle difficulty separately, so if you want the action nice and easy, but you want to work your brain, go for it. If you want the combat to be maxed out, but the riddles to be DSP stupid, you can. Hey, put both on easy and enjoy the atmosphere. Nobody has ever been hurt by somebody playing a game on easy. Now that you've become familiarized with the basics in town, Woodside is where you put the pieces together. It's sort of the first level of the game in a way. The first thing you'll notice is the incredible variety in textures and the masterful tiled rendering courtesy of Team Silent's programmers. Silent Hill 2, and even more so with Silent Hill 3, is quite a compliment to the technical know-how of these programmers, and the overall graphics pipeline is indicative that the team really drained the very last drop out of the PS2 hardware. The texture work, especially for an early PlayStation 2 game, is still gorgeous. Graphics technology jumped light years after Silent Hill 2, and even just a few years later, techniques like normal mapping became the hot new trick. However, some games that used this technique were notorious for copy and paste textures, a compromise to save performance, no doubt. Now, if you like that style, I'm not saying that my opinion is better, and I'm not trying to be a pretentious dick, it's just preference. But I could spend hours in Woodside Apartments, and I have. Packed into each environment are a staggering amount of little details. The fact that no apartment feels exactly like the other is a testament to the work ethic and artistic caliber mentioned already. Furniture is thrown about or arranged awkwardly, coat racks are falling over, there's random vandalism or graffiti, a blood stain tucked away in a closet, a glass jar open on a counter, patches of carpet in various stages of decay, curtain rods are toppled over, a mesh fence blocks off access to a bathroom, possibly suggesting the influence of the Otherworld, and so much more. But, as always, it's not just what you see, it's what you hear. The audio design is impeccable in Woodside. The creepy sounds of a lying figure shambling down the hall, gurgling and writhing, the sound of the radio, and the thump of James's footsteps cutting through all of it. I also like that when you've been running and stop, James will take deep breaths to regain his wind. And there's the ever-present soundtrack, which is incredibly effective, especially in certain apartments. Also, note the camera. All you can see is James standing in this tiny foyer, flanked by coat closets. The music sets the mood, but you can't see what's beyond, and again, your mind conjures up the worst possibilities. Once more, the unknown is king. Finding the flashlight is another illuminating moment. Sorry, I couldn't help it. But if you look closely, you'll notice that this mannequin is decked out in Mary's clothes. It's unmistakable. It's been theorized that this is Mary, deep from James's subconscious, lighting the way for him. I didn't think of that concept, but it's very clever. In terms of gameplay, things open up quite a bit here. First off, James can now read things in the environment, like the scratches on the wall by the grandfather clock. He can also read his map anywhere. Both actions he was unable to do secondary to the darkness. Also, if you turn off your light, enemies are less likely to spot you and thus attack you. Now, that's not as big of a deal as it sounds. I kept the light on at all times and just swerved monsters as needed. It's not a big deal. This is also where you get to fully appreciate the incredible dynamic lighting that Team Silent was able to pull off. James having his torch in his breast pocket was a brilliant choice by the designers. It not only leaves his hands free for two-handed melee, but seems to sit at just the right height to illuminate the environment without being able to see everything. Objects in the world cast believable shadows, and though this may seem pretty basic nowadays, this was astonishing in late 2001. The game still uses per vertex lighting, like in the original Silent Hill, so every apex of each triangle on a model has its brightness calculated to fit the needs of the designers. However, as a result, the illumination effect looks a little blocky, or pointy if you want to get technical. This is why I consider the HD collection to be superior. I'm joking. I could feel the angry, throbbing Reddit dick from all the way over here. There are also some really neat little bits of what appear to be Fong reflections, like on the little health drink vials. It's subtle, and it adds a layer of realism while also helping them to stand out in the environment just enough to aid in finding them without breaking the immersion. Anyway, the flashlight illumination was improved in the Xbox port and looks gorgeous in the enhanced edition on PC, along with the increased shadow depth. But it's still an incredible achievement on the PS2 and adds so much charm and visual appeal to Silent Hill 2. This is also where we're introduced to Laura, the little bratty kid that kicks away this key. Her significance in the story is to be revealed, but for a while she is just kind of this tiny terror.
Ow! Hey, wait! Damn it.
This is also where James locates his first firearm, a Beretta M92F. According to what I've read, the shopping cart thing is supposed to be a reference to the casual purchasability of firearms in the US, which is accurate, but then I suppose every culture has their issues. Firearms, the Aokigahara, and so forth. Either way, this room used to freak me out as a kid. With the pockmarked walls and spent shell casings everywhere, it was like someone was having a manic episode with a loaded handgun. It's an uncomfortable and visually striking way to introduce a part of your arsenal. There's also a pretty effective jump scare. And then, before you know, the eldritch horror and creep factor gives way to this. Returning down this hallway, you spot a figure in red. That's him, Pyramid Head, easily one of the most iconic figures in video game history. It's a shame that, after revealing who and what Pyramid Head is, that it's become this sort of guest figure in various pieces of Silent Hill media, as have the Bubblehead nurses, but I suppose that's the cost of being so good. We'll expand on the cost of that success more later. This shot in particular is important. Pyramid Head isn't rubbing his hands together, threatening James with clever bad guy lines. The bars between them are symbolic of James's reflection, and it's chilling when that makes sense to you on your subsequent playthroughs. Also, I like to remember this moment back when I first played the game in the early 2000s, back before the character's fame and odd bits of fandom he's been incorporated into, let's just say. You hear the radio before you see him, and then he just appears. It's genuinely unsettling. Inside room 208, just after the introduction, we see a man on a chair, eviscerated in front of a television playing Snow. Again, this symbolism is striking. You're introduced to Pyramid Head, this punisher, this executioner, and then you're led into a room where this man is destroyed in front of this TV. I guess spoiler warnings aren't worthy of much if you've been watching this far, but if you don't want another giant revelation ruined, here's another chance to stop. Okay, you still here? So, it's known that Pyramid Head is a manifestation of James Sunderland's desire to be punished. Pyramid Head is an executioner-type monster, out to hold James accountable for what he did to his wife, Mary. Later in the game, James visits Lakeview Hotel and finds a videotape showing that he definitively murdered Mary, after which he sits in a chair just like this, the television playing Snow in front of him, just like this. The character model in room 208 is in fact James's character model, and if you look at the hair, it's pretty obvious. Pyramid Head's appearance here acts as a signpost to tease this late-game revelation, and the dead body here is essentially representative of James being destroyed by this reveal in the hotel. Pretty incredible. Room 202 is one of my favorite little areas in the entire game. First things first, the soundtrack here, and I've said this many times, and I'll say it many more times, is brilliant. This disturbing combination of thumping samples. Again, it's back to eldritch horror. What could possibly be so awful about this room that this elevator to hell cord keeps being plucked? I think I remember reading somewhere that this sample was a malfunctioning copy machine, but I haven't confirmed that. You also get a look at the bits of red and green that the game uses sparingly. The usual color scheme has a perfect balance of grays, browns, and muted greens that denote the fog world, punctuated by the occasional blue carpet, or in this case, splashes of red and green. Then you get more holes. Once more, James proves that he is determined and inconsiderate of his own well-being. I mean, why else would you stick your hand in a random hole oozing with green sludge? But there goes Jimbo, and he finds the clock key. Now would be a good time to mention the puzzles, or riddles if you like. Silent Hill 2, like any good survival horror game, has plenty of brain teasers, which, as mentioned before, can be adjusted in difficulty before starting the game. And depending on your level of mental acuity and or chosen difficulty level, these can range from pretty easy to head scratching. Now, I usually play the game on normal because it feels just right, and I've never really needed a guide for this game. And look, I'm a simple-minded ape, so you should be okay, you bright little cookie. The clock puzzle is pretty stock standard and could come directly from many a Resident Evil before it. But then there are the riddles that are just so Silent Hill. There are more to discuss, but if we skip ahead a bit, in Woodside Apartments is a garbage chute in the laundry room. Firstly, and I don't think this is symbolism or anything, I think it's just creepy for a reason I can't explain. If you look at this lovely pre-rendered image, I've always thought the trash looked like a body. And James even comments on how the garbage is strange looking. Now, what makes something like this so Silent Hill, as I've labeled it, is that you need to find a 6-pack of canned juice to then throw down the chute to dislodge the trash. It's just such a bizarre thing to put together, and Silent Hill 2 is rife with strange, idiosyncratic combinations like this. I definitely don't remember the entirety of my first playthrough back when, but this particular puzzle sticks out vividly, and when I solved it, I was thrilled out of my mind and hooked like a fish. I also remember this. Yeah, that scene. Everyone has seen this one by now. As part of his 9 delusions or monsters that he manifested in the fog world and the Otherworld, mannequins are among them. We actually see one earlier when you find the flashlight on Mary's clothes, but this is a more notable appearance, being attacked by Pyramid Head in this kitchen. It's been interpreted by many, and fairly, that it's meant to imply forcible intercourse, or is a manifestation of James's sexual frustration during the 3 years that Mary was ill when the two likely weren't intimate. However, in a tweet by Team Silent's art director Masahiro Ito, he states that this scene of abuse actually represents James' internal mental and emotional conflict, and is not intended to depict forcible coitus. While the mannequins are, in part, said to represent his sexual frustration, they also portray his memories of his wife in the hospital, with the mannequin legs being braced by custom orthotics that helped Mary to walk as she grew weaker, as well as a tube in the abdomen, which likely represents a G-tube or a feeding tube. They also have no face, as James is blocking that part out specifically. Pyramid Head being this, emotional accountability agent, is dragging the mannequin towards James, as if to say, "Look at what you've done," which is why James fires his weapon at Pyramid Head, as he's not prepared to face the reality just yet. To put it bluntly, there's just so much shit going on in this brief scene. It's a lot to unpack. Afterwards, we stumble into a room with a corpse shoved into a fridge, blood covering the doors, all to the sounds of vomit. This is where James meets Eddie Dombrowski, another major character in addition to Angela and Laura. Watch his eyes as he sees James. That subtle aversion of his gaze, like a guilty man. But in between his bouts of blowing chunks, he emphatically states that he didn't do it. Without knowing who James is or what he wants to ask you, Eddie immediately insists that he's innocent. But that look is telling. He and James also briefly discuss that something brought them both to Silent Hill. And although James is trying to look after Eddie and mentions that he should probably leave here to be safe, when Eddie insists the same thing, James firmly states that he'll leave when he's done. Again, this is a man that puts his hands in green sludge holes and into toilets, so...
Red pyramid thing.
Red pyramid thing? I don't know what you're talking about. Honest. But I did see some weird-looking monsters.
Once we're done in Woodside, we head to Blue Creek Apartments next door. This is that bizarre, mind-bending architecture in the fog world. This is supposed to be a fire escape, but instead, we leap into the other building, and it's on to the next challenge. It's also here where we catch up to Angela Orozco, lying here in this gorgeous, legendary FMV before switching back to in-game graphics. You'll notice a little bit of a mirror motif in Silent Hill 2, the opening FMV with James in the bathroom, Pyramid Head on the other side of the bars in Woodside, and Angela here, not only in front of a wall-sized mirror not found in any other apartment, but also gazing at her reflection in the butcher knife. A knife, by the way, which is stained in blood. Talk more on that later. Regardless, I don't want to read too much into it, but I've always related this theme of reflection to the town itself, which, as we've established, is tailoring the experience to a person's inner torment, a reflection of your suffering. This scene is just excellent, because the writers don't explicitly state what Angela is contemplating. This is back when writers would sometimes assume people were savvy enough to pick up on things. James introduces himself, and Angela shares her name back. Although they met in the graveyard initially, they never actually traded names at that point. I like to think that this is the true James at heart. He asks Angela if she's found her mother yet. He demonstrates care, and he asks her to consider an alternative to what she's contemplating. However, Angela calls out James in a very early allusion to his crimes, based on the fact that he's here in this town with her.
Besides, is what we deserve.
No, I'm not like you.
Are you afraid? I'm sorry.
The awkward dialogue in this game is phenomenal. Those just off intonations, the characters fumbling at times to make their point. It may come off as poor acting, or perhaps something being lost in the translation from Japanese to English, but no, this was not a mistake. Jeremy Blaustein, the man who converted the entire Metal Gear Solid script from Japanese into English, was brought in as a consultant, a localizer, and a translator for Silent Hill 2. Konami hired the best, and the way characters speak is not an accident. This is how it was meant to be. And then you have the rotating camera angles, Angela gripping a kitchen knife tightly. The whole scene is disturbing, intriguing, and very sad. Obviously, this subject is sensitive to many of us. Believe me, it is. But it's handled with grace here. James convinces Angela to give him the knife, but when he reaches for it, she screams in terror.
I'm sorry. I feel bad. Please don't.
before then apologizing to James for being bad. Being that everyone manifests things differently in the fog world and in the other world, what did Angela just see that made her flee like that? Your mind has to fill that in, and it's terrible either way, surely. Not as terrible as this, though.
Oh my god, what the fuck is going on?
Another suggestive pyramid head jump cut. Ha, had to get it in. Here's our first boss fight, and now's the time to mention that this is, in essence, every boss fight in Silent Hill 2. There's no way of getting around it. You run laps, avoid attacks, and spam the fire button at a distance until you win. That's basically every battle. This actually highlights something very interesting that Takayoshi Sato, the game's CG character artist, mentioned in an interview with IGN back in 2001, where he noted that Team Silent is composed of artists first, programmers second, and gamers third. He mentioned that there were very few game freaks on the team. That may sound odd for a team of people that made video games for a living, really good video games at that, but when you play these boss fights, that statement kind of makes sense. It's hard for me to say that the bosses in this game are bad, because they're all perfectly playable, but let's put our shields down a second and acknowledge that the action gameplay of Silent Hill 2 is its weakest aspect. Again, it's totally playable, and I never felt like I died a cheap death once, but it's still kind of weak. And although you can usually avoid most combat encounters outside of the boss fights, action is a factor in this game. And sometimes you'll get cornered, or you'll come through a door where you don't have much of a choice and it's time to brawl. The long-standing defense of this is that James is not a cop or a soldier. He's just an average dude riding the wave of a psychotic break. It's posited that the combat is clunky by design so as to retain this feeling of being an ordinary man in a hellish situation. And I've read the argument over the years that characters like Chris Redfield and Leon Kennedy have weapons training, and therefore the gameplay is better in Resident Evil. What? In case you've forgotten, the original RE trilogy had tank controls that were just as stiff and robotic, arguably more so. Also, I don't buy the argument that Team Silent deliberately made James a putz because Chris, Jill, Claire, Barry, and Leon exist. Though it's completely fair to compare Silent Hill and Resident Evil, they're still two different franchises, so I've always thought that it was a goofy defense that one is one because the other is the other. Besides, relax. We don't need to rattle our sabers and get so defensive because ultimately, in my opinion, it's okay that the combat in Silent Hill 2 is rudimentary and clunky. It's part of the charm. Whether it was truly intentional thematically or not doesn't concern me. This was the style in survival horror at the time anyway, which is why when Resident Evil 4 came out in 2005, it was considered so revolutionary and instantly changed the landscape of third-person gaming forever, and that's not hyperbole. As far as my preference for old-school tank control survival horror versus the modern, over-the-shoulder style, one that seems to be adopted for the upcoming Silent Hill 2 remake by the way, I could go either way. They're both good to me, man. Chocolate or vanilla, landing strip or bush, is my mouth watering either way, then I'm good. People just get so insanely defensive about this game, and I just wanted to get that out of my system. All this talk about combat had me forgetting a crucial aspect of Silent Hill 2's graphics, the FMVs. Another huge deal at the time of this game's release was the super realistic CG cutscenes. I'm beating this point to death, I know, but it cannot be overstated how exciting this was at the time. The original Silent Hill's CG scenes were great, and I love them dearly, but the sequel was a gigantic leap forward. These run at 60 frames per second, which gives them this surrealistic, dreamlike quality. And although the body acting was motion captured, the facial animations were done by hand, adding to that feeling that something is just a little off. That uncomfortable, can't put my finger on it, uncanny vibe. And considering how much of this game deals with mental illness and border world realities, this tracks. James heads to Rosewater Park, hoping that this was the special place written in the note from Mary. After searching a bit, he finds Maria. I had mentioned this character earlier. She was on the posters for an adult club, Heaven's Night, and I had mentioned how those posters were indicative that James was already in the fog world, manifesting his own guilt, shame, and desire. Maria is, in simple terms, a creation of James's own mind. Maria is modeled on his late wife, and he comments on as much, stating that she could be Mary's twin, only that her hair and clothes are different. This is actually quite relevant, as Maria is, in essence, a much edgier, sexier version of Mary, conjured from James's own subconscious.
See? Feel how warm I am?
You're really not Mary.
I told you. I'm Maria.
Sorry.
That line is terrifying. This presentation from the fog world, this entity, Maria, is preying on every desire James has, and not just lust, but companionship, a chance to be a protector where he had failed before. She, or it, or whatever, convinces him that she's not only real, but quite warm and inviting. And Jimbo here is so shattered mentally that he goes along with it.
Well, guess we learned something new about you, Jimbo, you friggin' fag. You want to make out or something?
Also, you'll notice here that he never says his name to Maria, yet she calls him James as the game goes on. We'll talk about the expansion for Silent Hill 2 titled Born from a Wish, which stars Maria as the playable character before James's arrival in Silent Hill. But for now, the title of the expansion says it all. Much has been made about the comparison to Christina Aguilera at the 1999 Teen Choice Awards, and yeah, it's very clearly what the team used to model Maria. But this isn't the only well-known influence on this game. Obviously, Crime and Punishment was a major influence, as was Jacob's Ladder, and the works of David Lynch. But there's also an influence from Hans Bellmer, a German artist and sculptor that, among other projects, had crafted drawings depicting the story of the Eye, a 1928 novella related to fetishism and the unorthodox sexual depravity of two teenage lovers. Now, Team Silent character designer Masahiro Ito swears that his design for the mannequin monster came from traditional Japanese folklore, and that he wouldn't have designed this monster as he had if he knew of Hans Bellmer's work, but...
You sure about that? You sure about that? That's why? You sure about that? You sure about that's not why?
Draw your own conclusions. I believe him, and Ito-san is still an incredible artist either way. Anyway, some speculate that Maria is basically what the fog world has conjured to test James. Is he loyal to his wife? Although you of course know she's dead when you beat the game, at this point in the story, the audience, and James specifically, just isn't sure. So as the game progresses, she's often tempting him to give in to his carnal urges and latent desires, to have Mary be this exciting, hot, dangerous type lady, not the mild-mannered and ultimately sick and dying sweetheart. Maria's design is crucial, and something that I really hope Bloober doesn't ruin in the remake. Make note, she's supposed to be showing skin. She's supposed to be highly sexualized and tempting. That's the point. It's intentional. And if that detail is ruined to satisfy our present bizarro world society that probably won't buy, much less understand the plot of Silent Hill 2, well, I guess I'd say I wouldn't be surprised.
You're coming with me?
You were gonna just leave me?
No, but...
With all these monsters around?
No, I just...
I'm all alone here. Everyone else is gone. I look like Mary, don't I? You loved her, right? Or maybe you hated her.
Don't be ridiculous.
So it's okay?
Yeah, fine.
In keeping with Maria being a twisted facsimile of Mary, she regularly scolds James and toys with his mind, challenging his strength, masculinity, and gallantry. Now his tag-along, Maria and James head back out into town. James's next best chance of finding his wife is Lakeview Hotel. But first, the Bowl-O-Rama. So if you watch the opening FMV that plays on the menu screen if you idle long enough, it appears as though Eddie gave Laura a ride into town as he was being called to Silent Hill. Here, their conversation hints at Eddie's crime, but when we cut back to gameplay, we also get a line that lets us know that Laura is looking for Mary as well. We also get this classic,
"This town is full of monsters. How can you sit there and eat pizza?"
I love how he says pizza, like he's so pissed. The Bowl-O-Rama, though not a critical environment in the game story-wise, is one of my favorites. I reference this a bit in several of my videos, but plain everyday environments in gaming are something that I really enjoy. It's oddly satisfying to explore a digital recreation of a place I've been to 1,000 times, especially when they've been slightly warped. A big part of my love for a game like Fallout 3, for instance, is exploring recognizable environments, such as an elementary school or standing at the base of the Washington Monument obelisk. I recognize this monument. I recognize the Bowl-O-Rama in Silent Hill 2, but things aren't the same, and I quite like rummaging through them for a bit just to soak up the atmosphere. The cool thing about Silent Hill 2 is that, theoretically, the real-world Silent Hill could have a beautiful bowling arena that's enjoyed by the townsfolk, whereas James is stuck creeping through the grungy cacotopia that is the fog world, just on the other side of that pleasant reality. It's wonderful, and this emotion is doubled when you get to Heaven's Night.
It's locked.
Again, people, she's supposed to be tantalizing. So, in my mind, this area is iconic, despite the fact that it's so small. The score here is masterful, a sort of dreamy trip-hop arrangement. As I said, the environment itself is small, a stairwell with daylight trying to pierce the cloudy glass, the usual rotten-looking fog world textures, and then into the main floor of the club where a broader spectrum of warm colors positively beams inside of the otherwise grimy structure. And why did Maria have a key? Remember her face on the poster in the bathroom? It would appear that she was a featured performer at this club, but it's not outright spelled out to the player or to James. Also, remember Mary's letter? Yeah, I do too. Look at that pretty handwriting. Arguably the most recognizable level in Silent Hill 2 next to Woodside, Brookhaven Hospital is fantastic. Most people I've ever talked to about Silent Hill 2 over the years will say something like, "I remember watching my brother play that, the nurses in the hospital freaked me out," or something to that effect. It just sticks out. A big reason for that is the Bubblehead nurses. The Bubblehead nurse is arguably as memorable as Pyramid Head himself, if not more so. The way they shamble down the hall, head writhing, the screeching and wailing upon being bludgeoned, it's all very creepy and effective. The basic design of the outfit comes from the nurses in The Exorcist 3, which, by the way, is the greatest horror film ever next to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. The head twitching has often been linked to Jacob's Ladder, and yes, rightly so, but the head movement has a deeper meaning as well. Looking at the design, you'll see that their heads are wrapped in a transparent vinyl mask that sloshes with liquid. It's scary because the nurses are gasping for air and suffocating. They're thrashing to shake off the vinyl on their heads, confirmed by Masahiro Ito himself. But it gets worse. A portion of their faces are shaped like an infant, symbolic of James and Mary wishing to become parents but never having the chance. Also, notice the red square on their mouths, similar to the red square that James saves at throughout the game. Ito-san stated on Twitter that this could be dirt or dried blood, though the red squares overall have a still hidden meaning.
Ow!
What's wrong?
I just pricked myself.
Are you okay?
Yeah.
Many of the puzzles in Silent Hill 2 follow the classic survival horror tropes of collecting several pieces of something, bit by bit, until eventually coming back to a designated spot to put it all together. The Luis box in Brookhaven always stuck with me, as it's locked down tighter than Fort Knox, giving the impression that this must contain some heavy-duty item, only for James to find a strand or two of hair. It may seem inconsequential and a little bit of a letdown until you figure out what the hair can be combined with in another part of the hospital. I detest cryptic solutions to puzzles, something that the biggest tease in horror gaming history, PT, was guilty of. But Silent Hill 2 strikes the balance between challenge, backtracking, and the satisfying aha when you piece everything together and hear a lock click open.
That was perfect.
Things start to get dark thematically when Maria basically starts to complain of fatigue and that she needs to have a lie down while James searches for Laura. She lays on a hospital bed, coughing and with malaise, just like Mary 3 years prior. Oh, and someone else shows up.
I got this shit in 4th grade. Oh no! My face! Pimp smack your ass, bitch! You my hooker now. Now it's time for me to take my prize.
Yeah, Big Boy shows up to knock us back down, and this is where the bloody padded room is, Joseph's cell. It's presumed that Joseph, the patient, smashed his own head against this wall several times before leaving a clue. Throughout, there are hints and bits of commentary about the broken medical system in the US, with references to malpractice, barbaric, outdated practices, and the like. It's not necessarily in-your-face commentary, but it's there. Even Mary Sunderland makes a reference to the money that the hospital is making off of her, despite her wish to die. Shortly after this, James finds Laura in a room playing make-believe with her teddy bears. James wants to know how Laura knew Mary, to which she responds that she knew her in St. Jerome's Hospital a year ago. These little chats are heartbreaking when you know the truth. James has repressed what he did to Mary just a few days ago, and these little bits of doubt creep in until the big reveal, where it all becomes clear. He's not necessarily evil, and throughout the game, he genuinely believes that he's searching for his wife. James is a man circling the drain, mentally, and his delusion keeps him going. It doesn't help when this little shit locks you in a room with flesh lips, however.
Laura! What are you doing?
Comb your bed. I don't want to hear that shit.
These caged monsters have big, moist, blathering lips about their abdomen and attack James with their feet, attempting to strangle him. According to Masahiro Ito, the lips represent Mary's mouth when she was verbally abusing James at the height of her illness. And, of course, these cages could be seen as Mary being confined in her bed when she was too weak to move. There are also 3 monsters in this fight, which some have speculated represent the 3 years of her illness, but that could be a stretch. Either way, the fight is pretty simple, and again, the strategy is run around a room and shoot at the bad thing. It's not bad, and the boss design is super cool, but it's what happens after the fight that gives me the creeps.
James.
The siren calls out, and suddenly we're looking up at rusted metal fencing and grates, the sound of gurney wheels being driven down the hall while Mary calls out to James. As fast as it comes, we're back in control outside in a very small garden area under rainfall. James is now in the Otherworld. Remember, the Otherworld is, in essence, the fog world dialed up to 11. It's taking everything you're attempting to run from and making it twice as bad. The world stops making sense. The floors are covered in foul grime, walls and furniture are wrapped in filthy taut sheets, mesh fencing covers windows. You are trapped here, and the atmosphere is suffocating, ironically. The Otherworld was very creepy in a cool, video gamey way in Silent Hill 1, but in Part 2, thanks to the power of the PS2, this is just plain squalid. Nurses are here, but much filthier and more menacing. If you go back to the room that Maria was resting in, you'll find empty medication bottles, and you'll hear this awful, unnerving breathing, as if the goddamn room was alive and watching you. It's freaky, dude. Anyway.
Anyway? What do you mean, anyway?
The Otherworld is also dialing up Maria as this relentless force of guilt for James. She, in quotes, is chastising James for not caring enough for her when she was in danger, and that he better not leave her alone ever again. But there's also another clue to who or what Maria is. Maria may not be real in the sense that she's a human being, but she is this hollow entity that has been given bits of Mary, to include her memories, by the town. She's damned to carry out this role of the deceiver. She feels compelled to help Laura, but can't explain why. Mary had wanted to adopt Laura as her own, but was unable to due to her impending death. Though Maria isn't flesh and blood and is considered by many to be the antagonist, she's also very much a tragic character like the rest. And can we talk about the elevator game show, Trick or Treat?
Hi there, everybody! Thanks for tuning in. Welcome to another exciting edition of Trick or Treat!
When Maria and James take the lift to the second floor, what sounds like game show audio crackles to life over the speaker. The host announces James as the contestant and asks him 3 trivia questions about the town of Silent Hill. It's really cool because it will genuinely challenge how much you've noticed in your travels thus far. I've heard mixed opinions about this over the years. Some think it's disturbing, some think it's totally out of place and too silly. Me? I'm of the former. This seriously freaked me out as a kid playing it for the first time. 2 of the questions are simple, but then there's this one.
Amusement park. Okay, quickly, on to question number 2. Silent Hill witnessed a gruesome murder a few years back. A brother and sister were playing in the road when they were attacked and chopped into pieces with an axe. Torn flesh, smashed bones, splattered blood, and finally... What a terrible tragedy. What a gruesome end to such innocent lives. What was the name of the murderer who committed this vile act?
The fact that the host is just having a blast while he's detailing this horrid scenario is just off-putting. I can't put my finger on it. Anyway, if you find the chest and put in the answers correctly, it actually does pay off. The next section is decidedly less charming, however. I can justify the somewhat clunky melee, and we can debate if it was designed like that on purpose, etc., but the hallway chase segment just sucks. It's very simple. You run, you shoot Pyramid Head to slow him down, and you keep running until the elevator. But the pathfinding for Maria's AI is wonky as hell, and Pyramid Head is the bloody Terminator. If you're trying to get the Maria ending, you have to protect her from damage and not run into her yourself. This section can royally dent that attempt. It's not bad on normal action difficulty, but on hard, oh my god is it broken. The ending is incredible though. Maria gets trapped and skewered by Pyramid Head. The symbolism is quite obvious when you know what these characters are. As discussed, they're both creations of James's subconscious, and Pyramid Head killing Maria is emblematic of what he did to Mary before arriving in town. Upon leaving Brookhaven, James begins to question his reality and the purpose of his quest and life. But he has to keep going. It's all he has left. For now, we're back on the streets. And this is no longer a vacation.
This is no longer a vacation. It's a quest. It's a quest for fun.
No fog. Darkness now. We're back in town, only with the Otherworld influence taking hold. This is another nice, long breath of fresh air between the cramped corridors of Brookhaven and the punishing walls of Toluca yet to come. You also get a look at the Mandarin. This straight-jacketed monstrosity has large, club-like arms with mouths at the end of them. They swing along fenced floors covering deep, black chasms of infinity. They look cool, and the design is very creative, but they only show up a few times in the game, and the symbolism behind their design is somewhat flimsy. The official novel of Silent Hill 2, Chapter 4, titled Patient Records, adds some rich detail to the Mandarin. A quick passage. Quote, "The creatures were dangling from the floor by their thick, suction pad-like forearms, and they chased James with surprisingly quick and skillful movement. The way their arms flailed about as they followed behind him made it appear as if they were trying to get his attention, almost as if they wanted to say, 'I beg you, listen to me, please understand.'" Unquote. By the way, if you're a fan of this game and have never read that novel, I highly recommend it. It really adds a lot of interesting details to scenes that you're familiar with. And the ending. Ooh, the ending is heartbreaking. Returning to Neely's bar, there is a new message scrawled on the wall that reads, "If you really want to see Mary, you should just die. But you might be heading to a different place than Mary, James." That is ice cold. And what makes this awful message so effective is that, A, this is completely optional. Returning to Neely's is just a thing you can do if you're curious. Your curiosity gets rewarded with a scathing message, encouraging James to end it all and be ready for hell when he does. B, this is coming from James's head. The guy believes that he deserves to die for what he did and deserves to suffer for it. He's teetering on the edge of the truth, and his repressed actions are kicking at the door. James continues on and finds a letter and a wrench on someone's stoop. Nobody knows exactly who wrote the letter, which originally is written as a reminder, a note to self by the person who wrote it, only to then directly address James Sunderland himself. The theory is that it was written by Ernest Baldwin, but this is speculation. Either way, James needs to head back to Rosewater Park. Under the statue of Jennifer Carroll lies a box with a bronze key, which grants you access to the Silent Hill Historical Society. Jennifer Carroll was a martyr for and is venerated by the Order, a cult with a huge place in the Silent Hill series lore, which, interestingly, is only referenced vaguely in Silent Hill 2, this being one of those mentions. This has led to many people referring to the sequel as more of a spin-off than a full-fledged sequel, and yeah, that's fair. This is, for the most part, its own isolated storyline, dealing with much more human themes of guilt, abuse, lust, shame, and so forth. It's definitely a far cry from Harry Mason battling flying demons. This is easily one of my favorite mini areas in the entire game. After the large deep breath that was Stark South Vale, we're in this little museum. It's not a combat fest, as a matter of fact there are no monsters, but it's intriguing and disturbing for a few reasons. The first should be obvious. This painting, and I've used this word a few times, but I mean it, goddammit, is iconic. It's Pyramid Head in his element, appearing to have captured, tortured, and executed several dissidents of the Order. Either way, it's speculated that James and Mary, while vacationing in town, had taken a tour of this museum, and that this is one of the images etched into James's psyche. And when he was called here and manifested his Punisher, this is the form that was used. It's also been presumed that the curios and photos in this museum have been tainted by the Otherworld, and Masahiro Ito has stated that Pyramid Head is a distorted memory of the executioners in the town's past. There's another super eerie painting elsewhere that could have had influence, but we're almost there. Either way, James acknowledging Pyramid Head while seeing this painting is creepy. Not as creepy as the boat horn, though. Not only is this noise ominous and spooky like the siren, beckoning James to pass through the gigantic hole in the museum, but it's also a reference to the Little Baroness, a steamboat that sank mysteriously while traveling over Toluca Lake in 1918. All 14 passengers aboard the vessel vanished in Toluca Lake and were never found. The Baroness was a large plot element in Silent Hill: The Arcade, a bizarre on-rails shooter combining elements from the series up to that point. It came out in 2007. It was never ported to consoles or PC, because why would you want to make extra money, you dinks? Anyway, enough of that. The Historical Society was built on top of the remains of Toluca Prison. We've discussed the whole motif before in Neely's Bar, but this is symbolic of something else. This tunnel is truly a passage into the deepest, darkest part of Silent Hill's Otherworld, and not just for James. James has descended into the bottom of the Historical Society, and this is where the museum is beginning to blend into Toluca Prison. There are 3 paintings in this room: the Crimson and White Banquet of the Gods, depicting 2 people with red hoods performing what looks like a religious ceremony, potentially for the Order. One of these zealots appears to be wearing a red hood, nearly in the shape of a pyramid. This is another potential psychological imprint on James's mind that helped form the appearance of Pyramid Head. Also, it's just a scary picture, and I can't explain why. The next one is entitled Death by Skewering. To give a prisoner one last taste of freedom, they were given a choice of being strangled to death or death by skewering. Boy, that's just great. The final photo is of Toluca Prison Camp, which became Toluca Prison. In an interview from August of 2001, character and CG artist Takayoshi Sato said that the team crafted each environment first, and then built the story to fit the environment. They had done this with the first Silent Hill also. Well, you could have fooled me. The way Toluca Prison weaves into James's waning mental status, as well as with Angela and Eddie, is organic and pretty incredible. Down the hole we go. If there is a level that epitomizes everything that I love about Silent Hill, it's Toluca Prison. A quirky assembly puzzle, insanely good audio design, occult references, a few perfectly placed jump scares, and some more subtle horror that legitimately gave me chills back in the day. This is, as discussed, the Otherworld firing on all cylinders, and it begins with jumping through this massive hole. James ends up in this cylindrical pit. Searching around yields no exits until James finds a weak point. Bashing through it, we enter into a flooded hallway and are greeted by a lying figure. There's also a really cool segment in this rusty iron room. So for a while you've had this battery in your inventory for no particular reason, until this room. Your light dies out, and when you replace the battery, oh god! You have to punch this code in based on the brighter colors of 3 buttons, and then do the shake to get the creepies out. From here, make your way to this room where things are openly starting to make no sense. This MC Escher-esque room sees James needing the spiral writing key to open this cell door. With each successive hole that James plummets into, he's diving deeper into his own madness. The Otherworld is now testing each participant to their very limits. While James remains somewhat stout and resolute, others on the path are weaker and are capitulating.
Killing a person ain't no big deal. Just put the gun to their head.
If it's not obvious, Eddie Dombrowski is clearly losing his mind. The effects of his experience in Silent Hill have been eating away at his sanity. He says that he's joking about causing the fatality laid out on the cafeteria table, but I don't know about that.
Just came after me. Besides, he was making fun of me with his eyes, like that other one.
Just for that, you killed him?
What do you mean, just for that?
Eddie, you can't just kill someone because of the way they looked at you.
Oh yeah? Why not? Till now I always let people walk all over me. Just like that stupid dog. He had it coming too.
Eddie.
I was just joking, James.
He seems pretty comfortable with it. Eddie also makes mention of a dog, something that will come up again later. He's also clearly procured a firearm and is waving it around with his finger inside of the trigger guard. At the opposite end of the cafeteria, James finds the tablet of the gluttonous pig, one of 3 tablets needed to complete a puzzle, each of which represents James, Angela, and Eddie, with the gluttonous pig clearly being meant for Eddie. Further into the prison cell block, James can battle a few lying figures, but what's so much scarier is the large, deep, booming steps coming from one of the cells, with a deep, terrifying voice emanating from it. People debate what this voice is saying. It very clearly sounds like ritual, and this would track with James finding a cell covered in books on the occult with scribbles about the wall, one of which looks like the halo of the sun, albeit slightly different from the one used in Silent Hill games going forward. But in a creepy detail, if the sound is played in reverse, it sounds like, "Are you sure?" This has been linked to the Rebirth ending, in which James seeks the power of the old gods of Silent Hill, involved in reversing the slight case of death that Mary is dealing with. What's even scarier about this is that James can kill this invisible prisoner, and the monster groans like a normal man. It's abnormally normal, and it's freaky. Speaking of freaky, out in this large courtyard, James can approach the gallows. This is where you pop in the 3 tablets. If you look at the engraving, you'll clearly see the 2 executioners in the form of Pyramid Head, having just skewered a prisoner. This also foreshadows an event later in the game. A very sinister detail is that this doesn't appear to be a traditional gallows, where a prisoner would die by strangulation in the rope. There's no apparent drop platform. More likely, prisoners were drawn and quartered. If you listen closely, you'll hear the faint sounds of hooves trampling on the earth, which indicates the prisoner being dragged behind a horse prior to being fastened up in the hangman's noose, to then suffer further cruel punishments. I truly do hope that the players of this game take their time and check every door. In this cell, decorated with various paints and brushes, sit 3 bits of art. One is called 436 People at a Recital. Not the catchiest name, granted, but some speculate that this represents Eddie's life, being mocked and humiliated in front of everyone. The next is called Woman in Flight, which has been theorized to be Angela Orozco fleeing from her home to Silent Hill. The last is The Burning Man, which depicts the Lakeview Hotel engulfed in flames. The other 2 theories for the prior paintings are interesting, but this one is just plain foreshadowing. God damn it. Ah, yeah, that one always gets me. I hate how abused jump scares have become in modern horror gaming and films. It's a cheap way to slither out of creative writing, but when they're done right, they are effective. See? At this point, James has procured the other 2 tablets. In addition to the gluttonous pig, we have the tablet of the oppressor, thought to represent James, as well as the tablet of the seductress, thought to represent Angela. These tablets reflect each character's own warped vision of themselves, with insulting labels for each. For your troubles, you're gifted the horseshoe, a piece of a puzzle. I had mentioned earlier the surreal, odd puzzles in the game, and none fit that description better than this one. So, James needs to open this hatch. In order to do that, he fashions a handle by melting a wax doll with a lighter before sticking the horseshoe in until it hardens. And down another hole we go. Oh boy. The morgue. The image of legs, or pairs of feet, poking out of these small holes in the wall, with one set just sitting right next to you on a table. This is just foul. Passing through the door, we find yet another giant hole where it's likely that the corpses of executed prisoners were dropped into like a chute. Kinda like the garbage chute in Woodside Apartments with the mysterious garbage bag. Anyway, into another hole. So, if Toluca Prison is where those called to the town are being tested, then the Labyrinth is where that person's will is set to be destroyed. After diving through yet another hole, we take the elevator far, far below the surface. The Labyrinth is broken up into an upper floor that more resembles an apartment building's hallways, and a lower level, which is more of an earthy, subterranean maze. This scenario is incredible. First off, Pyramid Head chases you throughout, a la Mr. X. Okay, cool. But you can find Pyramid Head's chambers as well. This is just so eerie. A cramped room bathed in red light, like the one you had seen him under initially. A bloody table is adorned with the great knife. It's such a trip that you can pick up this weapon and just carry it around. You walk slowly and swing it slowly, but it does super high damage. But just to find this, you know what I mean? This is where Pyramid Head kicks back in between punishing this matricidal dickhead. There are several pairs of forceps, as well as these lattices that Flesh Lips in Brookhaven had been seen hanging from during your encounter. And if you look up, you'll see a few of these cages are filled. Female figures dressed in what looks like straitjackets. God, this is just so cool. This Labyrinth head puzzle is very Resident Evil-esque, but I mean no disrespect. Resident Evil is the shit, to put it eloquently. You move the head around to line up this strange metal, cube-like room until the pathway is clear. It's tricky, but it's not terribly difficult. It also leads into the most disturbing cutscene in the game.
You're alive! Maria, I thought that thing killed you. Are you hurt bad?
Not at all, silly.
Maria? That thing, it stabbed you. There was blood everywhere.
Stabbed me? What do you mean?
It chased us to the elevator, and then...
James, what are you talking about?
Just before. Don't you remember?
James, honey, did something happen to you? After we got separated in that long hallway? Are you confusing me with someone else?
Oh, God, that is freaking creepy. Maria is back, and she's acting like Mary, or even worse, a mother. This is the most chilling cutscene in this game. There are stranger, there are sadder, but none as blood-curdling as the one here. This is where the mask slips, and Maria basically implies that she's not real, but she is if James wants her to be. Then she tempts him with a little action if he can reach her. The symbolism is obvious. All of James's desires are just out of reach. He can touch her, but only so much. She comes off like his loving wife, but then drops the act and tempts him with the potential to be unfaithful. It's all so well done, and the shadowing over Maria's eyes in the FMV are just plain unnerving. It's also a reference to the legendary television show Twin Peaks. Also, sometimes I realize as I'm talking into this mic that I feel like Gordon Cole.
Hello! I was wondering if I might trouble you for a cup of strong black coffee.
So, James, having mixed emotions, no doubt, sets off to find a way around those bars. Also, a quick bit of trivia, and I never would have known this without reading up on it. Apparently, this room is a reference to a Francis Bacon painting. It's pretty darn subtle. This, on the other hand, is not.
Daddy, please don't!
Oh God, here it comes. Yep, this is the abstract daddy.
Your worst nightmare, butthorn!
If you're not certain, this entire room is an otherworldly depiction of the assault that Angela suffered at the hands of her father and brother. The creature is a few bodies uncomfortably sandwiched together and struggling in a bed. Fleshy holes line the wall with metallic pistons pumping in and out. You can probably figure out what that means. Like the rest of the bosses in the game, the fight is running around and shooting a big lumbering enemy until it's defeated, and that trend remains unbroken here. The important details here, outside of the obvious abuse symbolism, is that this is where these two characters' otherworlds are intersecting. Angela is being tormented in this room that we can see by this creature that we can see, but it gets worse. According to Masahiro Ito, the abstract daddy that we see isn't the one that Angela sees, as Silent Hill projects everyone's demons to them individually, with these dimensions overlapping one another to form this terrifying Hieronymus Bosch hellscape. It's a reason why it may have been strange to James for Eddie to be eating pizza. But Eddie's fog world at that time may have seemed relatively normal to him when compared to James, and we know that little Laura was just hanging out in plain old Silent Hill. We may be seeing the abstract daddy as this monstrosity, but perhaps Angela was seeing something much worse, her father. It's something that I love so greatly about this game. So much of it is still shrouded in mystery, and a lot of it is left ambiguous and open for interpretation. And I'm old enough to remember early chat rooms about Silent Hill 2 before Twitter, where several things have since been confirmed or refuted by members of Team Silent themselves. It was a cool time. Some theories were extremely fascinating, others were steeped in pretentious nonsense and hysteria, but that's okay. I just like remembering the world before Twitter anyway. This scene is also important because Angela just straight up calls out James for his whole good guy routine. She knows that people don't get called here for nothing, and he just sort of quietly accepts that she may be onto something. Also, shout out to Donna Burke who plays Angela. Her performance fits the character so well, and she's able to throttle between different levels of emotion, from a frenzy to a cold, accusatory confidence.
You said your wife Mary was dead, right?
Yes. She was ill.
Liar! I know about you. You didn't want her around anymore. You probably found someone else.
That's ridiculous. I never...
Butthorn!
The imagery here isn't exactly understated, but this cutscene is excellent, especially if you connect to the second message in Neely's bar and one of the potential endings. Anyway, this is a cool puzzle and offers a little insight into what prisoners of Silent Hill would have been convicted of. After using the key of the persecuted, we find Maria. Instead of scoring, James finds her beaten to death, presumably by Pyramid Head. The result is brutal and sad enough, but it's actually referencing Mary in her last days alive. Due to her condition, her skin had become deformed, and she thought of herself as a monster. Maria's battered visage mirrors Mary's disfigured face, and with James crying over Maria in what resembles a hospital bed, much in the way that he did with Mary, this scene is extremely sad. Again, he's being punished for not owning up to his crimes.
Mary.
After this mind-crippling experience, James heads to the catacomb. There are 3 freshly dug graves, inscribed with the names of James Sunderland, Angela Orozco, and Eddie Dombrowski. There's also a tombstone for Walter Sullivan, the person named in connection earlier with the horrific murder of kids. I don't know if this was intentionally setting up a future antagonist, but, well. Oh, and one graphical feature you may have noticed by now. The grain on the screen is intentional. Team Silent put noise FX over the graphics to give Silent Hill 2 a grainy, gritty look to it. After beating the game, you can disable the effect on your subsequent playthrough, and the Enhanced Edition has it off by default. I could take it or leave it, but it is kind of weird that you can't disable this right off the rip, but this was the artist's original vision, and so, hey, deal with it until you beat the game. Of course, the way through here is James jumping through another hole, this time his own grave. Walking through this corridor, bellowing bits of freezer fog, this is where other worlds bleed into one another once more. So, if you had been suspicious of Eddie becoming unhinged at the cafeteria in Toluca, this all but confirms that Eddie has been completely broken by his time in Silent Hill.
Eddie, what are you doing?
What does it look like? He always busted my balls. You fat, disgusting piece of shit. Big fat piece of shit. You make me sick. Fat ass, you're nothing but a waste of skin. You're so ugly, even your mama don't love you. Well, maybe he was right. Maybe I am nothing but a fat, disgusting piece of shit. Big fat piece of shit.
Eddie, have you gone nuts?
I knew it. You too. You're just like him, James.
Hey, I didn't mean anything.
Don't bother. I understand. You've been laughing at me all along, haven't you? Ever since we first met. I'll kill you, James!
And thus, the fight against Eddie begins. It starts like every other fight in the game, a box, an enemy, blam blam blam. Then it gets a little darker.
Do you know what it does to you, James? When you're hated, picked on, spit on, Just because of the way you look? After you've been laughed at your whole friggin' life? That's why I ran away after I killed the dog. Ran away like a scared little girl. Yeah, I killed that dog. It was fun. It tried to chew its own guts out. Finally died all curled up in a ball. Then he came after me. I shot him too, right in the leg. He cried more than the dog. He's gonna have a hard time playing football on what's left of that knee.
You think it's okay to kill people? You need help, Eddie.
So, Eddie admits to killing a dog in a brutal fashion, then disabling who we can assume was his primary bully, a football all-star who is now crippled as a result of Eddie blowing out his knee with a bullet. Credit has to be given to David Schoeffel, the voice of Eddie, who is really undersung when people talk about the acting in this game. He plays this enraged, slovenly psycho perfectly. It's a really understated performance, right until the very last scene where he's finally gone off the rails. It's hard to feel sorry for Eddie like it is for Angela or James, as his pain is, in part, controllable, whereas Angela was given no choice about her tragic youth. But I'm not trying to diminish the horrific effects of a lifetime of relentless humiliation. Maybe he had an overbearing mother that fed him constantly as a way to comfort her boy. Perhaps there was no male figure in the house to help him strengthen his body and his confidence. Anyway, that's pure speculation on my part, and again, it's what I love about this story. Up for interpretation. Regardless, his Otherworld is a very scary nod to how he sees himself. If you look closely, you'll see hanging meat in this freezer. Not particularly unusual until you look closely and see that these cuts are rather portly, with large abdomens and wearing khaki shorts that resemble the ones Eddie is wearing. This is James experiencing a taste of Eddie's Otherworld, as he had with Angela earlier. This is how Eddie sees himself, just a big, fat, disgusting slab of meat on display. The boss fight, and you're not going to see this coming, is, a large room where you trade shots with an enemy. Well, at least he has a projectile, and you can take cover behind the fatty carcasses with beige shorts. The ending is also very telling as how hard James is suppressing what he's done to Mary. Even in self-defense, he's completely repulsed at his own behavior, having killed this guy. But then, he questions whether or not his wife has really been dead as long as he thought. This whole section is great. And with that, James ends his time in the Labyrinth. He was strong enough to conquer it, but the threads have certainly begun to unravel. Just like that, it appears as though James is back in the fog, and boy is he ever. His next stop is Lakeview Hotel, but to get there, he rows across the notorious Toluca Lake. So, naturally, anytime a person is hovering over a body of water that can't be seen through, things are spooky. Add the fog and the history of the disappearing steamboat, and well, this is quite eerie. However, in my time rowing across Toluca while recording, I noticed something that I've never really taken conscious note of over my various playthroughs of Silent Hill 2. The pacing. I know this game has its detractors, and that's totally fair. Not everything is for everyone, but for my money, I really enjoy the pace of Silent Hill 2. The broader, open sections where you mostly just wander through town, dodging the shambling monsters, exploring at your own pace, and trying to figure out where to go, interspersed between them are the tight, narrow corridors of the apartments, the hospital, Toluca Prison, etc. Solving quirky puzzles and having just the right amount of story peppered in throughout each segment. I know it's been said that Team Silent were artists first and gamers last, but they certainly seem to have crafted the game to play at a well-structured pace. It will vary for each person, of course, and I know some people are likely in total disagreement, but I never felt like one area or one level dragged on too long for its own good. And just when I feel like I may have had my fill, the environment will alter, or a cutscene will give me another drip of character development, or I'll find that last piece of a puzzle. And look, I've put thousands of hours of my life into high-speed, fast-paced FPS games. Shit, I've beaten nearly every Call of Duty on Veteran, even that piece of garbage Black Ops 3 on Realistic. Action games and platformers that require precise timing, where the pace is go, 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 I love. Unreal Tournament, Mario, Battlefield, Devil May Cry, Cuphead, and so on. But rowing across Toluca Lake in this rickety wooden rowboat reminded me of how this game just lets the player breathe from time to time, to reflect. And just like that, James is back in the special place. Right from the start, James's subconscious, aided heavily by the influence of Silent Hill, is screaming at him to discover the truth. The map found in the lobby has pre-marked room 312 with the note, "Waiting for you." This is the room that James and Mary shared in this hotel 3 years prior. At the service desk is a note to James about the videotape he left behind. This scene is extremely important.
Did I scare you?
Yeah, you did.
You're here to find Mary, aren't you, James? Well, have you?
No. Is that why you're here too?
She's here, isn't she? If you know where she is, tell me. I'm tired of walking.
I wish I knew.
But she said it in her letter.
What letter?
Wanna read it? But don't tell Rachel, okay?
Who's Rachel?
She was our nurse. I took it from her locker.
Implying that Laura was a patient at St. Jerome's as well, or a family member. In this letter, Mary says goodbye to Laura. She states that Laura may hate James because she's only ever seen the side of him where he's a bit surly, but underneath, he's a really sweet person. In the end, she tells Laura that she loves her like her very own daughter, and if things had worked out differently, she was hoping to adopt her. Then, she wishes Laura a happy 8th birthday. This is when a pivotal scene plays out between James and Laura.
Laura, how old are you?
I turned 8 last week.
So, Mary couldn't have died 3 years ago. Could she really be here? Is this the quiet, beautiful place she was talking about?
Me and Mary talked a lot about Silent Hill. She even showed me all her pictures. She really wanted to come back. That's why I'm here. Maybe you'll get it if you see the other letter. The one Mary... Huh? I must have dropped it.
Laura!
I gotta find it!
Laura!
This is one of the last pieces of sanity James is holding on to. The realization that there's no way Mary could have died 3 years ago, as he had been thinking this entire time. This is cruel in hindsight. knowing what we know, because for a first-time playthrough, this may actually give the player hope. Maybe Mary really is up in room 312, or maybe it's all an illusion, a dead giveaway, and one that is so exceptionally clever that I still shake my head at the long-term booking of this mechanic. After James hears about Laura's birthday, reality begins to trickle in hard and fast. Go into your inventory and check Mary's letter. It's nothing more than blank parchment. The game doesn't tell you to do this. It's not a goal, it's just there if you look. And the reality is, the letter never existed in the first place. James was imagining the goddamn thing this whole time. Lakeview is obviously greatly inspired by The Shining, and there's even a boiler on the Fritz down in the basement, a clear nod to the book. But the rest of this place is Silent Hill all the way, and doesn't feel like a ripoff or anything. James runs around the level, collecting keys and puzzle pieces to figure out how to get to room 312. The big task is to complete the music box and play the proper tune. Also, take note of this particular room. The reading room. Fairly normal at the moment, but it will change. Everything will change. If you try to find a workaround to the third floor, someone will reach out to you. That's so freaking creepy. Again, rewarded for your curiosity, I suppose. The employee elevator won't let James on with items in his inventory, not even healing items or his light. You need to deposit everything in this shelving unit and step in. Unarmed and vulnerable. See, I couldn't remember if they yep, they move. And your defense is just juking. Of course, there's another one. The employee bar, much like Heaven's Night, has wonderful little splashes of pink, green, and red, the warm glow of the jukebox, and the torch with no light bulb in it. In one final scene of odd object combinations to solve a puzzle, James can locate a can opener, which then opens this very peculiar can of light bulbs. Now, this is one place where people read way too much into Silent Hill 2. And that's coming from a guy reading way too much into Silent Hill 2. The light bulbs are actually a reference to the 1988 surrealistic Chechian film, Alice, a loose adaptation of Alice in Wonderland. This image sticks out to me eternally, and I almost use this as my thumbnail because it's so peculiar. Another peculiar bit that I've never forgotten, after you relinquish all your items and go through the trials unarmed, you eventually get your gear back, and you can explore with your flashlight, which reveals more details in the environment for the curious player. Near the window is a heating unit that you can inspect. It says, "I'm Johnny, one hot guy." It can be inferred that this heater, set right under the singed curtain, is what started the fire that burned this hotel down. Not to mention, it says that Johnny is one hot guy. Obviously. Oh my god, look, it's David Bowie in Season 3. So the music box puzzle sees James insert 3 different music boxes based on different princesses, The Little Mermaid, Snow White, and Cinderella. In a clever twist, each box is found in a referential setting. For instance, The Little Mermaid is on the lip of a fountain outside the entrance of the hotel, and Cinderella is locked in a briefcase, the code of which is found by using paint thinner on a Polaroid blacked out with marker. Snow White's music box is found by some apples in the pantry, which James will comment on if you interact with them, stating that they smell foul, possibly alluding to the poison apple of the tale. Upon solving the puzzle, 3 more boxes spin out in rotation, which may further reference Thumbelina, Rapunzel, and a set of legs with red shoes, likely a reference to Karen from the fairy tale titled The Red Shoes, also by the same author as The Little Mermaid, Hans Christian Andersen. Interestingly, the hotel stairway key rests on the Red Shoes music box specifically. Why does that matter? Well, in the story, Karen disregards her adoptive mother's funeral to dance, and is condemned to dance in those red shoes for eternity. Eventually, she begs an executioner to chop her feet off, only to have the red shoes dance with her amputated feet in them. Eventually, she begs God for mercy, repents, and is sent aloft to heaven. This is interesting, as this is where James gets the key to the floor that hosts room 312, where the truth will set James free. The song is absolutely hypnotic, and I've studied many notes to this tune on a loop. Alright, no sense in delaying this. Walking into room 312, it's quiet. Footsteps only now. A few couches in the room, big windows, curtains drawn back to let the light in, and a VCR.
Are you taping again? Come on. I don't know why, but I just love it here. It's so peaceful. You know what I heard? This whole area used to be a sacred place. I think I can see why. It's too bad we have to leave. Please promise you'll take me again, James.
Reality sets in on James. No more delusions. His whole world has collapsed. Laura comes in to check on James, and he reveals the truth to her. She rightly scolds him and runs off, and all he can do is apologize. Now, just because he's seen the truth doesn't mean he's reversed his psychological damage.
Voice.
Mary communicates with James through his radio, and the things that she says are really unsettling. Despite the fact that he knows she's gone forever, by his own hand, but he desperately pursues this. The song playing after this revelation is the perfect score to follow this tragic scene. The sheer magnitude of everything that James has done hits him. Lakeview's true shape is revealed. The corroded hallways, charred walls, and the lower levels from the fire. You can practically smell the mildew and ash. Water damage is evident, and the walls are leaking, as if the world itself is crying alongside us. All the while, this droning, spiraling track is the sonic equivalent of your head spinning. Without any hyperbole whatsoever, this whole scenario is absolutely perfect.
That was perfect.
It gets sadder. Enter the reading room once more, and a new set of headphones is on this desk that weren't there before. Have a listen.
Mary's
very sorry.
But you're a doctor. It's your job to heal people. How can you just let her die?
Please, calm down. As her doctor, I promise I'll do what I can. But there's still no effective treatment for her condition.
How long does she have?
I'm afraid I'm not sure. 3 years at most. Perhaps 6 months. It's impossible to say with certainty.
This just crushes my soul every time. So, James wanders a while. Some of the environment becomes nonsensical, such as walking into a hotel room leading you out into another hallway. You can become disoriented like James is, no doubt. But before long, we see an old friend. Angela is here on a burning staircase, standing next to what appears to be the stretched out and framed skin of two men, both castrated. These represent her father and brother, her two abusers. She ended both of them brutally, explaining the bloody butcher knife you've just had in your pocket. Now, a big reason why this scene is so unbelievably effective is that this is how James is interpreting Angela's other world, how he's receiving it. It's why Angela thinks James is her mama at first, until touching his face. It's why he says,
"It's hot as hell in here."
James can only feel the heat and doesn't see the flames as Angela does. He also doesn't see the two bound, castrated corpses in the room, which is how it's written in the novelization and how I interpret Angela's ugly otherworld. This scene is truly heartbreaking. Despite being subjected to the worst kind of abuse, despite all the horror and trauma that she's experienced in her young life, she didn't find answers in Silent Hill. Angela never finds redemption. She's given in to her temptation to end her own life, to stop the pain forever. James makes a feeble attempt to encourage her not to, but he knows it's useless. And the saddest, most desperate part about this whole scene is that Angela truly believes that she deserves all of her suffering, and that she deserves to be no more. She also calls James out one more time for keeping her knife when she asks for it back.
James, give me back that knife.
No, I won't.
Saving it for yourself?
Me? No, I'd never kill myself.
You sure about that?
There's a moment in this scene that means a great deal to me, but that's in the epilogue. So, Angela wanders off into the flames to end her own suffering, James being unable to follow because of the flames. For James, the suffering is only beginning. Yeah, the 9 red squares. It's been debated up and down what these represent and what the red squares represent in general throughout the game. I've heard the theory that it might symbolize the 9 monsters that James battles throughout the game, which is a pretty solid guess and quite plausible. Masahiro Ito has teased this idea, but explicitly states that he wants to leave it open to the player's imagination as to their true significance. He has stated that these are related to the red squares covering the mouths of the bubblehead nurses, and we see them on the mouths of the prisoners in the noose puzzle as well. Anyway, the imagery is iconic, and was one of the international covers. Entering this large room, James sees Maria fastened to what looks like a bed frame, symbolic of Mary on her deathbed. Maria is then impaled by a spear, wielded by Pyramid Head. And again, this is the truth of Pyramid Head. He's just fulfilling James's wish to be punished. It could be argued that James himself is the protagonist and the antagonist. He's living out this nightmare born of truly sad and unfortunate circumstances and his extreme reaction to them. Pyramid Head, in a way, is the antidote to James's torment. This revelation just blew my mind back in the day. Then you have the boss fight, which is, you guessed it, running around a big square room shooting at the enemies.
Ow! You shot me, you a-hole!
It's still really awesome, though. Pyramid Head has now punished James enough, and he has accepted the truth. Ready to bear the consequences of his actions, the two executioners impale themselves, as their purposes have been fulfilled. You receive the scarlet and the rust-colored egg, thought to represent Mary and Maria. And then it's time to leave. Also, creepy detail. This is supposed to be James's face in the door. Things get more heartrending, though.
What do you want, James?
I brought you some flowers.
Flowers? I don't want any damn flowers. Just go home already.
Mary, what are you saying?
Look, I'm disgusting. I don't deserve flowers. Between the disease and the drugs, I look like a monster. Well, what are you looking at? Get the hell out of here!
Oh, fun fact. If you drag the great knife down this hallway, it takes exactly as long as the dialogue does.
I know the truth. Now it's time to end this. I understand now. It's time to end this nightmare.
He sure likes ending everything. Oh, in-water reference. So Maria is dressed up in Mary's sweet little outfit that James remembers her in, trying to bait him into accepting her as his forever gal. Oh, and they got this outfit from Con Air, by the way. That is, until James rejects her, and she turns into this flying demon, done up like a twisted evil version of Mary on her deathbed. Anyway, the boss. This one just kinda blows, even on normal. And on hard, oh god, it's just outright broken and terrible. At last, she falls, and in a final, cruel yet liberating twist, the game makes James take the final shot to end it all. Remember, this was 3 years before Snake Eater came out, and it still hits like a truck. The gut punches aren't over, though. Depending on the ending you receive, the dialogue in this scene is slightly altered, but in my ending, titled Leave, James expresses his true motivations behind what he did. No qualifications, the bare truth. And it's absolutely heartbreaking.
James.
Forgive me.
I told you that I wanted to die, James. I wanted the pain to end.
That's why I did it, honey. I just couldn't watch you suffer. No. That's not true. You also said you didn't want to die. The truth is, I hated you. I wanted you out of the way. I wanted my life back.
James, if that were true, then why do you look so sad?
Mary?
James. Please. Please do something for me. Go on with your life.
One final sad nail in this coffin made of tears.
That's why I want you to live for yourself now. Do what's best for you, James. James, you made me happy.
God damn, that one always hurts. Always. Apparently, Monica Taylor Horgan actually broke down into tears while reading that final monologue. And yeah, that performance is incredible, obviously. So, in the Leave ending, James presumably exits Silent Hill with Laura and potentially adopts her, as Mary had wished to do when she was alive. There are six possible endings for Silent Hill 2. 3 are potentially canonical, 1 leans heavily into the supernatural, and 2 were deliberately made to be silly, fun jokes. There are many requirements for how to achieve different endings in Silent Hill 2, and are based on a behind-the-scenes point system that the game tallies up without you knowing, as well as the need for specific items for some of the endings. In such a carefully crafted, masterfully curated experience, it really is telling of Team Silent's dedication to their craft that they went so far as to plan out this many potential endings. Tell you what, let's talk about them.
Excellent.
So, I told you about the ending that I got, in which James and Laura leave town. There's so much debate about which ending is the true canon ending, and the team have never come out and definitively stated which one it may be. I think this ending is the happiest of all. Laura didn't do anything to deserve the painful experience that she's had. She's just a kid, and was a friend to a very sick lady. And perhaps, just maybe, James holding himself accountable for what he did and atoning for his sins buys him a second chance to be happy in life. And that's what Mary wanted for him in the end. To get this ending, you have to show James some love. Keep your health in the green and listen to the entire hallway conversation where Mary yells at James for bringing flowers. You're also encouraged not to read the diary on the roof of Brookhaven, examine Angela's knife in your inventory, or read the second message in Neely's bar in Dark South Vale. I did these things to record my footage for this review, and I still got the leave ending. However, depending on which of the 3 primary endings that you get more points towards one of the other endings on your next playthrough using the save file. You also get a chainsaw. This time I got leave, so on my next ending, I stand a greater chance of getting Maria or In Water. As sad as this game is, the Maria ending is downright depressing and kind of scary. Whereas the leave ending gives us a glimmer of hope and shows that James is willing to confess the raw, uncomfortable truth about why he did what he did, this painful moment allowed him to free himself from the burden of delusions, to live with his decision and quite possibly have a second chance at redemption by caring for Laura. In the Maria ending, James fumbles his confession before the boss fight and gets called out for wanting Mary gone and then moving in on Maria instead. After the battle, this broken man is talking with this illusionary woman, this fantasy lady, and telling her how he wants her.
James?
I want you. I want you with me.
Are you sure?
Come on. Let's get out of here.
What about Mary?
It's okay. I have you.
The two make it back to the observation deck overlooking Toluca Lake when Maria starts coughing.
You'd better do something about that cough.
Man, what an asshole. See, I told you, the way he parks? He's just cold and indifferent, chasing his lustful, psychotic delusions all the way back to the car. And that she's not real, I always interpreted this as James committing to Maria, staying in either the fog world or the other world with her. She gets sick, dies, and James repeats this cycle of torment over and over. So, to get this one, stay close to Maria for a total of 10 minutes. Check on her after leaving the hospital room when she has a lie down in Brookhaven, and try to check on her twice in the jail cell room after you find her beaten to death. Protect her from monsters, and don't bump into her more than 3 times. If you're new to this series, you may be asking, what? Yeah, this is real. There's no checklist in the main menu. There's no way of tracking this outside of a pad of paper and a pen. The reason this seems so weird is that Team Silent wanted you to play this like a human being, not like a gamer checking a box. I mean, if you bumped into me a bunch of times, didn't check on me when I was ill, or hit me with a pipe that you found impaled in a car, I probably wouldn't want to be your imaginary girlfriend either, bitch. Oh, and don't check Mary's photo or letter. James is a one dead/fake woman kind of guy. Unless you don't plan on keeping your lady dead for long. So... You ever see Pet Sematary?
Mary, you look so peaceful. Forgive me for waking you.
So, yeah, the rebirth ending. It is, as it sounds. After completing the game once, you can collect 4 items that James will need to presumably offer as trade to the old gods of Silent Hill for a chance at reversing Mary's terminal case of death. It's super spooky. Him just rowing across Toluca Lake with Mary rolled up in that plastic in the back of the boat. Gives me the willies. But it's not nearly as terrifying as this. Yep, this is also real. Dude, words cannot describe how much I love this dumbass ending. It turns out that this dog named Mira has been controlling the game the entire time. There's a little Sheba. Atlas has nothing on this twist. Funny enough, when they show close-ups of Eddie's gut in the credits, Mira starts to growl because Eddie is a dog killer. I've even read the theory that the dog Eddie killed was Mira's relative, and she never forgot. You have to get a key in a doghouse and then open the observation room on the 3rd floor of Lakeview Hotel. This isn't the weirdest ending, though. Okay, alright, the UFO ending was only in the director's cut edition of the game, or the greatest hits on the PS2. You have to complete James's story and Born from a Wish for this. You get a blue gem in the bathroom at the start of the game. You use this item in 4 specific places, the last one being room 312 before popping in the VHS tape. And then, Harry Mason and a bunch of aliens abduct James Sunderland. Yeah, this is obviously a goof, and it's brilliant. I love that Harry is still the pixelated model from Silent Hill 1. But, okay, that's the funny stuff, and I thought the tone of the video needed lightening. But we gotta get dark one more time. As I said, there's been a lot of debate as to which ending is truly canonical, and Team Silent will let us make our minds up about that, which I am grateful for, because although I prefer the Leave ending because it's the happiest, in my headcanon, the in-water ending is the true finale. For what it's worth, this is my opinion. James Sunderland came to Silent Hill to die. The ending is similar to Leave, where James sits with Mary's spirit as she lies on her deathbed. Notice that he appears to confess his sins, but the dialogue is slightly altered. In Leave, we have this.
That's why I did it, honey. I just couldn't watch you suffer. No. That's not true. You also said you didn't want to die. The truth is, I hated you. I wanted you out of the way. I wanted my life back.
Then, for In Water...
That's why I did it, honey. I just couldn't watch you suffer. No. That's not the whole truth. You also said that you didn't want to die. The truth is, part of me hated you for taking away my life.
You killed me, and you're suffering for it. It's enough, James.
So, not too big of a difference, but in Leave, he commits fully to confessing his hatred, and within Water, he very slightly pulls his punch. It might not mean much, but I found it interesting. Now, what does have more significance is how Mary bids farewell to James. In Leave, Mary states that he deserves to go live life and be happy, to carry on. Within Water, she states that he's suffering and that it's enough. Not to be happy or to live on or anything like that, just that the suffering can end now. Also, in Leave, Mary simply wishes him well. There's a bit of silence, and then the scene cuts to the graveyard where you eventually see Laura running along, James in tow. Within Water, Mary has a small coughing fit and dies once more, arm dropping to the side of the bed to emphasize it. James takes her from the bed and off to the car, where you hear his decision. And with that, James plunges into the lake with Mary in the back seat. Again, it's always up for debate, but I truly think that James came to Silent Hill to ultimately end his own life. Everything leading up to this moment was simply him running from the truth about what he did to Mary, and once this reality sets in, he had no hope of coming back. Many years ago, Guy Seehey, the voice of James Sunderland, stated that he believes the In Water ending to be canonical, and actually gives a solid theory as to why, which is actually even freakier than the entirety of the game. Quote, "I think I know now why Team Silent put all of their hearts and minds into that particular ending. I say all this because I was recently reminded of a dark and taboo social practice in Japan called Shinyu. It literally translates as middle heart. However, what it describes is something many Westerners will find very difficult to comprehend. Shinyu means family suicide. This is when either a husband or wife kills their partner and then themselves. If there are children, they are killed too. The most common means is to suffocate and or drown the other family members, followed by killing yourself in a high-speed car crash. In most cases, the dead bodies are placed into the car to be with the perpetrator at the end. Shinyu is accepted in Japan as a way to end the kind of family shame that cannot be outlived. When it happens, nobody talks about it, and even if the family were famous, there's no media coverage. The police do not investigate such deaths as murders, not even the children's deaths. Everything is swept under a rug of silence. With the In Water ending, James fulfills his obligation to the Shinyu, thus ending his family's shame." Unquote. Whew. Remember when I said earlier that every culture has their dark, dark traits? Thank God there was no Second Amendment nearby to spoil the ritualistic familicide. Either way, I really appreciate that Team Silent hasn't gone on to comment on which ending is the, quote, right one. I don't like big dumb cliffhangers and or contrived sequel bait, and thankfully, Silent Hill 2 has neither. It's a pretty ingenious way to conclude the story of James Sunderland, while still giving the player a bit of dominion in the end. There is one more ending to talk about, but we gotta cover the game leading up to it first. Dude, I love Born from a Wish. I love it. It's not a whole lot of content. I beat it in 47 minutes, and that's with taking notes. It's linear, it really only has one puzzle, and it lacks that dreadful, horrifying atmosphere of the base game with James and all. But it's one of my favorite bits of media ever. The game starts with Maria holding a large revolver inside of a dressing room in Heaven's Night. One thing this expansion does so well is give the character of Maria much more life. We know she's conjured from the old gods of Silent Hill as a temptation for James Sunderland, and to punish him for his crime of matricide. However, Maria isn't a robot, and at the start of the game, isn't aware that her purpose is James. She states quite clearly that she's scared to die, she's afraid of pain, and that she doesn't like being alone. Now, are these her feelings, or is she channeling Mary Sunderland? She presents as quite sinister in the base game, but this introduction makes you see the character differently. She runs around town for a bit, battling monsters, if you choose. She has the Chinese cleaver and her revolver to protect her. Maria doesn't have a radio like James, which can, at times, result in a few unexpected encounters, which got a couple of shouts from me. In close quarters, scary music will play, indicating the presence of enemies. She still uses a few red squares to save her progress. I don't know if the mysterious symbolism transfers to this story as well, or if it was just there for familiarity or convenience sake. Either way, the Silent Hill town stuff is mostly filler to pad out time. The Baldwin mansion is the real meat of this sub-scenario. It's so awesome. I love this interior dearly. It feels quite a bit like Resident Evil for obvious reasons, but in a very Silent Hill way. It's abandoned, save for a few monsters roaming the hall, which I guess had to be tacked on for the sake of combat, though I could have happily just played through without them. These monsters are just more of James's manifestations, which I guess could be justified by saying that he was on his way to town at this point, but it was more than likely an affordable asset flip. Maria finds a door which slams shut, and a voice finally responds from the other side.
Is somebody there? Open up. Hello?
Stop it. You're disturbing me.
Thank God. I finally found somebody. Can you open the door?
This is Ernest Baldwin, an elusive recluse that only speaks to Maria from behind closed doors.
Is it really necessary for me to answer all your tedious questions?
This is the one puzzle thrown in for the sake of having a puzzle, I suppose. It's kind of cool and not too hard to solve. Again, I had mentioned the mansion aesthetics, and I love them. They feel straight from another time period, and they are. As Silent Hill 2 takes place in the late 70s or early 80s, and this house has likely been relatively untouched over the last 10 years before that, it makes total sense. The curtains, the wallpaper. Also, as much as I adore the legendary Otherworld, it's really cool playing a game with this engine that's not rotting or completely falling apart. It was actually quite striking when you make it to the kids' room, with the muted pinks and greens scattered throughout the room. Yeah, the kids' room. Time for another spoiler warning. If you do not want to hear the conclusion to Born from a Wish, stop right now. You got it?
Yeah, I got it.
Oh no, she fell out the window! Don't move her.
What happened?
So, Amy Baldwin, Ernest's daughter, fell from a window 10 years ago. Finding this sweet birthday card to her dad was absolutely heartbreaking. And then you hear her.
To my daddy.
Not gonna lie, that got me pretty good the first time. Pretty spooky. Upon returning to Ernest, he tells Maria what happened.
Do you know a little girl named Amy?
Why do you ask me that?
This letter. To my dearest daddy. It's from a girl named Amy Baldwin. Your daddy?
Yes. Where'd you find that?
Up in the attic.
Oh. What a fool. Now, when it's too late, I finally understand why. Why she was there. Why she was holding that empty envelope when she fell.
Ernest. Amy. She isn't... I'm sorry. I'm sorry I reminded you.
No need to apologize. You didn't remind me. I've never forgotten. Maria?
The music in this scene is utterly incredible, and a soundtrack so full of legendary, respected, and beloved music. This is my favorite track. Maria is sent on a quest by Ernest to retrieve a mystery white liquid from Blue Creek Apartments, which was kinda cool actually. You'll see a few old familiar haunts, no pun intended, like the room where James battles Pyramid Head for the first time. Maria retrieves the white liquid and returns back to Ernest. This is also the white chrism, one of the many items needed to resurrect Mary in the rebirth ending of the base game. Interesting that. It's here where Ernest Baldwin indicates that Maria was brought to life by the old gods of Silent Hill, telling her that she was born in this town. He then mentions James and refers to him as a bad man. It's at this point where you can see Maria stop and process the information, almost as if she's downloading it. The blurry memories of Mary are slowly starting to unlock and become her own. This also happens to an extent earlier when she finds a teddy bear and thinks of Laura, despite the fact that she's never met her or knows anything about her. Then Maria finally opens the door to meet Ernest. The camera pans around the room in a few beautiful shots, and we realize that the Ernest Baldwin that Maria had been chatting with was the spirit of the man that once lived here. I've always presumed that Ernest was attempting to resurrect his 7-year-old daughter after her death, and was going to use the power of the old gods to do so, like James in the rebirth ending. But in his grief, Ernest likely took his own life, and thus his spirit is confined to this home. Until Maria shows up, that is, and provides him with an ingredient he needed, the white liquid. After finding out what she really is, a walking hallucination and interloper, Maria debates taking her own life. After considering it, she tosses her revolver over a wall and instead chooses to fulfill her destiny as a doppelganger. The scenario ends with James meeting Maria at Rosewater Park. The clue is in the title. Maria is literally born from James's wish to have his Mary back, but more sexy and virile, as well as his unconscious desire to be punished. Like I said, there's not much to Born from a Wish, content-wise, but man, I love this scenario, and the story of Ernest and Amy got me good. In 2002, the Xbox port was released. Being that this game was developed natively for the PS2 and with the inherent difficulties involved in porting, the transfer wasn't flawless. Fog is less prominent on the Xbox, and you might notice a tad less of those voluminous plumes in the forest or out in town. But this is pretty nitpicky, honestly, and it's not as if the effect is completely non-existent. Also, the FMVs run at 30 frames per second instead of 60 like the PS2. They still look great, but that 60 FPS is what gave those scenes that weird, uncanny, dreamlike quality that made them special. But the Xbox port also utilized per pixel lighting instead of the vertex lighting as discussed earlier in this review, which is why the cone of the flashlight looks nice and round and full instead of the sharp, blocky lines of the PS2. You might be wondering, is the flashlight emanating from James's back as well? Yeah, it isn't supposed to. This is a bug from playing the original Xbox disc on the Xbox 360, which is how I recorded this footage. If you have the original console, you'll be good to go. If you have the 360, well, James is a human lantern sometimes. You'll occasionally get little white scratches on some of the surfaces. This is also due to the 360, but this stuff isn't game-breaking or anything like that. Also, this port is much cheaper than the PS2 original, so it's a great option if you're not willing to sell blood to pay a scalper. Don't feel like you're missing out on anything if this is how you can play Silent Hill 2. It also comes with Born from a Wish. I promise, it's a wonderful port, and if you desperately have to see the PS2 fog, watch a YouTube video. Matter of fact, look, there it is. Wow. I had already talked about the Enhanced Edition on PC earlier, but just to reiterate, this is a fan-made project that restores the PC version that released in 2002, which was a broken, buggy mess. Again, I have to say, this is absolutely the definitive version of Silent Hill 2. It's utterly gorgeous and has so many convenient options for customization. As to how you acquire this version, well, you can spend anywhere from $200 to $500 on a copy online. Must be nice having that Jake Paul money. For the rest of us common folk trying to pay for car repairs and butt plugs, there are ways. But it's in my best interest to abandon this conversation. Otherwise, I may wear egg on my face.
Well, I get it. It's very clever.
The people that crafted the Enhanced Edition deserve a massive round of applause, and I truly do thank the team that put this project together. Seriously, you guys are incredible. This is the real HD version of Silent Hill 2. I said it, now I gotta do this. I suppose I could have made a separate video to milk Silent Hill 2, but I'm Hypertension Johnny, goddammit, and I make big long videos that don't get picked up by the algorithm. So the HD collection. First and foremost, this game seems to have 3 different types of players. People who have never played the original versions and wouldn't notice the flaws, the hardcore fans that hate this version with a seething passion, and if you dare say one positive thing about it. Then there are people like me, who are lucky enough to have played every version. Look, the HD collection has its issues, okay? It really does. It was a mess. And I remember, I still have my PS3 copy in a CD sleeve in the closet from launch day. I remember the clean streets, the incorrect shadows, the Comic Sans font on Silent Hill Ranch, the Maria eye-teeth texture issues, the unfinished environments being revealed by poor fog rendering, the bugs, crashes, and so forth. I remember. I'm not here to defend Konami or this collection. As a matter of fact, it's quite obvious that this thing was super rushed to be released close to Silent Hill Downpour. It's a perfect example of a soulless corporate money grab. Konami hired Hijinks Studios, an up-and-coming developer with a modicum of experience that made games like Glee Karaoke Revolution on the Nintendo Wii. After the success of the fantastic HD versions of Metal Gear Solid 2 and 3 a year prior, Konami simply wanted to make a low-cost cash-in of their other beloved franchise. And I think this is why so many people hate the HD collection. It's not entirely the fault of Hijinks Studios. They were just hired to do a job. The blame falls squarely on the cheapskates at Konami. Hijinks was provided with what they thought was the completed code for Silent Hill 2. After they started work on the project, surprise, it was incomplete. Hijinks had to bust their butts to make this work. When they found an incomplete or missing texture, for instance, they themselves had to go in and recreate that texture. That's like contracting someone to build your house, but they make you hang the drywall. But, you know something? I have played through and beaten Silent Hill 2 in the HD collection at least twice that I can remember over the years. If you find a copy of this collection somewhere for cheap, and you have an old PS3 or 360 lying around, I have to say that it's at least completable. I didn't say good. I didn't say that Konami weren't abusing this wonderful franchise by hiring the lowest bidder and then giving them incomplete resources and an unreasonable time frame to finish their work. They did. They're soulless businessmen, not artists. I know. But Silent Hill 2 in the HD collection still has the amazing story as detailed over the last, 68 pages. It has the endings. It has Born from a Wish. I know that I'm supposed to just outright hate on the HD collection. And when people get that mob mentality of you're either with us or against us, there's no room for nuance or negotiation. It's like arguing politics on the internet. No compromise, no brain cells. And that's another issue with Silent Hill 2 that I had alluded to earlier. It's a victim of how awesome it is. There are a group of people that simply can't accept or enjoy any other Silent Hill games after 2. They just want things the way they were at that super special moment in time when gaming was nearing its peak excellence. Look, I get it. This is, for many of us, the pinnacle of the series, and Silent Hill games after Team Silent's departure were quite a mixed bag in terms of quality, to say the least. The point is, Konami didn't care about this HD collection, and the results are evident. But if this, for whatever reason, is really the only way that you can play Silent Hill 2, well, it's definitely better than nothing. That is assuming you select the original voice acting.
Mary, could you really be in this town?
Well, I'm alone there now. In our special place. Waiting for you.
I got a letter. The name on the envelope said Mary. My wife's name.
Okay!
I despise the new voiceovers that Konami plopped into this game. It's not necessarily the fault of the actors. They were doing the job they were hired for, but they sound way too professional and polished. There's that actor gravitas, where the acting in the original version was much more awkward and, how do I say this, self-conscious, which really added to the creepy, ethereal quality of the cutscenes. And as we talked about earlier, it was deliberate. Now, the HD version does let you select the original cast of actors instead of the redubs. There was a bit of drama to have the cast sign waivers, with some dispute over residuals and so forth, but they're here. But then you have the song Promise being re-recorded as an electric guitar like it is on the album instead of the acoustic guitar like in the original game, and it sounds dumb. But again, if this is your only option, it is better than nothing. Now, in the HD version of Silent Hill 3, they took out the original voiceover altogether. This is unforgivable, but that's for another day. Then there's the remake. Yeah, I saw the gameplay trailer. I also saw some dude post his reaction to it. Like 2 frames into the video, the guy threw his hands up and declared with confidence that it wasn't Silent Hill. Pump the brakes, man. Give it a second. We get it. You're a real fan, and that's great. And if the remake ends up as complete rubbish, I'll grab my pitchfork and my torch, and we can all go Frankenstein together. And believe me, I have my reservations about it after hearing the dreaded modern audience comment come out of Team Bloober. But I want it to succeed so badly. The gameplay footage release thus far looks pretty good. Is it just the Resident Evil 2 remake and The Last of Us with James Sunderland? Yes, it's pretty obvious where the inspirations are coming from. But seeing what highly successful franchises have done and incorporating those elements doesn't automatically make it bad. And if the gameplay updates are what Bloober is referring to by modern audiences, okay, maybe that could be cool. Again, the whole combat was bad on purpose argument for Silent Hill 2 is just something I'm not convinced of. Remember, Team Silent were artists first, programmers second, and gamers last, and gameplay for survival horror in general was much different back in 2001. So maybe some updated mechanics could breathe fresh life into this story. Do I need them? No, absolutely not. I could play the original another 5 times this year and be pleased as punch. I don't need lying figures turning into clickers or midriffs being covered to appease my blue hair, but I'm not going to base my entire opinion on Bloober's work off of a few trailers. I'd love to give it a chance, and I hope it succeeds in the worst way, especially if that means the same treatment is given to Silent Hill 1, 3, or even 4. Oh baby! You don't have to hate on things to show everybody on the internet that you're a true fan. And if you are one of those people, I get it. I totally get it. Jesus, it's not like Konami's been doing a whole lot to give people confidence over the past 20 years. But hey, look, at least wait until you play it for yourself to bash it. After that, your opinion is just as valid as anyone else's. The problem with any piece of art that is so well made, especially an experience like Silent Hill 2, which has a lot of beautiful ambiguity throughout, is that it becomes a victim of its own success. A lot of gamers have this bizarre, possessive attitude about the titles they love. And although there is a wonderful, dedicated fan base with Silent Hill 2, there are also crabs in that bucket that simply cannot accept that anyone else could love it as much as they do, and everyone else's theories are nonsense compared to their own interpretations. Now, I remember reading speculative theories about Silent Hill 2 as early as probably 2002, and people would disagree about what was right and what was wrong with each theory, but things have gotten so much worse with the advent of social media. I suppose that could be a general statement, but with bottomless cesspools like Twitter or X or whatever, the obnoxious, obsessed, quote-unquote fans of the series have become so infatuated with their own ideas about what Silent Hill should or shouldn't be. I've seen people tell Masahiro Ito himself that he's wrong about certain theories in Silent Hill 2, the guy that designed the fucking thing. Not to mention, he's had to face the not-so-subtle threats and hostilities from other communities of bullies, but that's an entirely separate can of light bulbs. Headcanon is fine, and it's a lot of fun reading other people's thoughts on this series. I love that stuff. I get it. I mean, you're watching this video, right? But if Masahiro Ito tells you what something means, stuff your arguments up your own ass. Now that I've expelled that venom, I think it's safe to say that the legacy of Silent Hill 2 is that of a highly regarded masterpiece, and rightly so. I assume you've noticed by now that I'm in the fan club. The game sold 1 million copies in its first month of release, and that was before the game was ported to Xbox and Windows. The game had mostly high review scores with the occasional detractor, which is fair. I very clearly remember the Game Informer review. I don't remember the guy's name, but I do recall he reviewed the Xbox port as well, and referred to it as his arch nemesis or some dumb shit like that. Now, everyone is entitled to their opinions, but I have to say, the game clearly wasn't meant for him, and I think he'd have rather been slugging down Diabetes Code Red, playing another round at Blood Gulch. There was also an outlet called 4 Fat Chicks. Okay. Their review said that Silent Hill 2's story was not that compelling. It's hard to hear dialogue when you're chewing, I know, but to each their own. This was therapeutic. Whether 10 or 10 million people watch this review, it makes me so happy to have been able to talk about this thing that I love so much. Silent Hill 2 is a truly rare effort, a piece of interactive art from a team of renegades that marched to the beat of their own drummer. It's a masterpiece in every way. If you've watched this far, I just want to share a small story about why this game means so much to me personally. When I was 18, I was thrown out of my home by the parent that I was living with. I wasn't into drugs, I wasn't in a gang, I wasn't boozing. As a matter of fact, I was about 4 months away from starting college and leaving home anyway. I was just going to study for my entrance exams and game a little. One day, my parent walked in and told me to leave. Just like that. And said that if I didn't, they'd call the police. I know you must be thinking, okay, but what did you do wrong? Nobody just does that to their kid for no reason. Guys, I've been trying to figure that out every year since then. I packed whatever I could fit into 2 duffel bags and I took off walking. I called my other parent from a gas station phone and they made a few phone calls before getting back to me. My grandmother said she'd be willing to take me in, I just had to make it there. After miles of walking and several breaks because my arms were smoked from carrying 2 big bags, I finally made it to her apartment, and she welcomed me in. I stayed at her place until I left for college a few months later. I never really dealt with the grief of what happened, I just stuffed it down and tried to stay tough. I could tell all kinds of cool stories from that time in my life, but relevant to this video was the time when I finally completed Silent Hill 2 for the first time ever. I had played it on and off for several years, but I never committed to finishing it. The game blew me away from top to bottom, and I remember staying up late in the night, sitting on the edge of a twin mattress, staring at the little Toshiba TV that my grandmother let me use. Oh yeah, I carried my PS2 in one of those duffel bags, bitch. Never give up the ship. Anyway. But when I got to this scene, when Angela says,
You see it too. For me, it's always like this.
I broke down crying. Just something about her showing James the true hell that she's always living in, the one that nobody else sees, caught me really off guard. It's like that crying scene in Good Will Hunting, where Matt Damon is doing everything he can to fight back the tears, but they just overpower him. That was me. And when she walks off to presumably take her own life, I had a very cold chill run up my spine. I remember having this epiphany, as I had been very much toying with the idea myself at that time, that I could never do something like that to my grandma, this woman who took me in out of pure, unconditional love. Every autumn, I think of playing Silent Hill 2 back in that little guest bedroom. A cool Michigan breeze coming through the window to my left, and I think of my grandmother. She really did save my life. She passed in October of 23, and I never got to tell her that story. But she knew, and she didn't expect praise or anything as vapid as money. She just wanted me to do something meaningful with my life. Well, Joan, I hope for the time being this tribute will suffice. Now, if I get a letter from her inviting me back to that apartment, well, this was good. This was good.
Mary, can we use your office?
You might ask the sheriff if we could use his office.